do not see my YouTube streaming. Hopefully it's working. It's weird. Just 1 second. I'm just going to double check the YouTube. I'm trying to use Restream IO, so it might just have entirely. Oh yeah, it is live. Oh great. Restream IO. Okay, good. All right. Well, I'm going to give this a few minutes before I start reacting. And I'm going to react to this gentleman here, Elliot Hulse. I remember his videos from like a decade ago, and I haven't watched him in years. And a friend of mine sent me his video, so I figured I'd react to it because I remember like the videos I saw from him previously. He's been married to his I think high school sweetheart, and he's in a good marriage. So since he's making a video like this, I just think that's strange to hear from him. I'm just gonna set things up for a few moments and then we'll go back. I don't know why I can't see my stream on the YouTube dashboard, but I'm just gonna have to live with that. Well, I guess it's all gonna be from the restream. All right. I'll give it a few moments. If anybody comes in, then I'll start reacting. If not, then I might just call it. Got it. No, it's not made for kids. Save. Okay, I can see it now. That's really weird. All right, well, let's see. I don't really have much else to say. I put out a video yesterday, if you haven't seen it, and that was about a possible voting boycott and if that's worth it or not. I had fun making that video. And I will give this another couple minutes before starting in on this video. But before we start the video, let's just look at the comments. If a woman asks for marriage, she's planning for divorce. Oh God, that's pretty good. Let me just put this here. I'm also streaming this to Twitter, so if you're watching on Twitter, you should probably just come to YouTube. I don't know why, but you can't see chats or you can't do chats on the Twitter live stream, which I think is kind of annoying. I don't know what the point of it is, you know. Okay, so I could see it live on Twitter. Good. Put this on. Oh, what the hell? There is a live chat on Twitter now. Wow. Oh, that's sick. Oh, that's great that they added that. Good. All right, well, whatever. I'm just going to get started on reacting to the video. Let me just look at a few more comments. This is funny. My grandparents were my model for marriage. They had an excellent friendship and were obviously very busy at night, as I have a ton of aunts and uncles. All right. Before my grandmother passed away, she said that the best decision she ever made in life was marrying my grandfather. Sadly, marriages like this don't exist anymore. I'm 44 years old and refuse to settle down and get married to this screwed up society. Sorry, in this screwed up society. Damn, that's sad. There is a saying, men have to work 5 times as hard for a woman 20 times worse than what their grandmothers were. That's what they call hoflation. If women are wondering where all the good men went, we are hiding for our own protection. That's too bad. All right, well, the hell with it. Let's just get into this. Just take that down. All right. So I don't know if you guys remember Elliot Hulse, but I used to watch him way back in the day. I used to watch him man, I think he's been on YouTube damn near since the beginning of YouTube. But he used to have like motivational workout videos and things. So I mean, he would sometimes give advice too for men for dating, but then I don't know what happened. I don't know if I had like a new account or what it was, but I stopped watching him for a long time. And someone sent me this video, so I figured I'd just give it another shot here and see what he's up to.
Modern marriage is a man-eating trap. So today we got a question from a viewer who says, yo, Elliot, I want to marry my girlfriend. I love her and I want to make a family.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see the chat. Mr. Winston Smith. Shaw, when you censored, oh, God. I don't know what the deal, you know what, let me address this Peter Nolan thing. The reason I censored him is because I always see this Peter Nolan comments in either on Pearl's video, and then when I was on her show, those same Peter Nolan comments came over to my video, and it's always like, oh, he proved child support or whatever, the state can't do that to you, but there's never any explanation of how he does that, and it's just a bunch of spam comments. So it's like I always have to do that. I always gotta like hide these folks. So I don't know how to hide them here. Hide user from channel. There we go. So the one chat we got so far is this guy. And every time Peter Nolan's name is mentioned, we will hide and delete him from this, because so far Peter Nolan has said nothing useful other than he's this amazing person who's somehow proved child support doesn't exist. And I'd love to see Peter Nolan go to the family support court himself and tell that to the judge. So, all right, moving on.
The problem is, I'm aware of the legal traps of having a marriage license, he says. He says, I understand that the divorce rates are high. They're mostly initiated by women. And with this marriage license, the family courts and the government is usually stacked against the men. Men lose in all divorce cases, and upwards to 90% of divorces are initiated by women. So it's literally like walking into a trap. Also, he recognizes that in this context, as crazy as it sounds, men have all the responsibility, but none of the authority in this state-sanctioned marriage.
So this guy has a girlfriend and he wants to get married, and he's rethinking it because he's not sure he wants to tie the knot legally through the state contract. And what Elliot just said right now about all the responsibility, none of the authority, is a very red pill saying right there. So it seems like whoever's asking him this question is probably a viewer. It's not letting me.
In my marriage license situation, I thought of this analogy when you mentioned having all the responsibility and none of the authority. I remember being a kid, and our sidewalk in front of the house had a crack in it, and I asked my dad, because my dad fixes everything. I'm like, Dad, why is the sidewalk this way? Why don't you fix it? Because somebody might trip over it and you could get in trouble. Well, he explained to me that according to the state laws, I'm not allowed to touch that. It's in front of my house. But if somebody trips over it, I take all the responsibility. So you have no authority over the sidewalk in front of your house, meaning you can't change it, fix it, work with it, deal with it in a resourceful way without permission. And then if someone trips over it, you're at fault. And that's kind of like what modern marriage in this government-sanctioned context really is all about. You're in a contract that says you have all the responsibility. It's been traditional that men have all the responsibility, but the minute your other half, woman per se, says, you know what, I don't like something, I'm out of here, you can't do anything about it. So if shit goes south, it's your fault. It's always your fault. It's always the man's fault. And so that's why, he's hesitant. Our friend is worried, and it is a tough question to answer from a man who loves marriage. I love being married. I love my wife. I love my parents who remain married and gave us the tradition of lifelong marriage. I have an example of a good marriage. Me and my wife model ourselves after my parents, and hopefully my children will carry on the tradition of a lifelong traditional marriage also. It is a life spring. It is a joy. It is an amazing thing, and I wish it could work, but I'm not gonna lie. The way things are set up today, modern marriage, like I said, is a fucking trap. But there are some things that you could do, and it begins with context. But before we get into my opinion about what you can do, which...
Sad that he has to agree that it's a trap. And I always remembered about him is that he has a good marriage, because I remember hearing that and being surprised years ago from Elliot Hulse, because he's just like, I think he's only ever been with one woman too, which was interesting to me. So him saying it's a trap seems like he's probably become aware of what's out there. But it's sad. I mean, I wish that guy who's asking this question didn't have to worry about that and could just marry his girlfriend without having to think, this deeply about it in terms of a trap.
Begins with how you think about marriage and then ends with some things you can actually do. I want to talk a little bit about how we got into this trap that we are in terms of marriage. And by the way, it's not that marriage doesn't work or can't work, it's that marriage is under attack. Marriage is under attack from the government, meaning rules and laws and obligations and contracts and shit like that, but it's also under cultural attack.
I mean, he's got it pretty much right there. My main gripe is always that the laws are way too invasive into it. And he's right, though. It's not just a government attack. It's also a cultural attack, because I don't even know if attack's the right word, or if culture has just changed so much that it's just made the way we do marriage outdated. But you can say it's an attack. I wouldn't hound him on that.
Our society, Western society, whether you know it or not, has been in covert war for the last 100 years. And so this war...
he places it pretty far back, 100 years. I usually think around like no-fault divorce, 69. But, even prior to that, there were still changes, and birth control, I think, was mid-60s. And, I guess 100 years can work. Seems usually a little far back from what I'm used to.
Is manifest on multiple fronts: government, school, music, media, all these things, laws, right? It's designed to do a number of things to subvert our culture. But the main one, the real one, the way you really destroy a culture from the inside out is by destroying the family, destroying the family unit. I know not everybody agrees with that, because you've been brainwashed by the very Bolsheviks that want you to destroy family. And a part of the cultural shifts that is often evident through...
Not exactly sure what he means by Bolsheviks, but whatever.
Through the music and such that has destroyed marriage and family is...
there's the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, and I think that's what unseated the nobles. So maybe he's just kind of comparing the new kind of liberal progressive notions as a style of Bolshevik style revolution.
Fornication culture, abortion, contraception, cohabitation, all these things we take for granted. And I get it. I grew up in the same culture also. And I'm not saying anybody that does those things are bad, but you got to understand they're not best practices. They don't lead to a culture, and they're not bred from a culture that honors life, honors the family, truly wants to see the society thrive. And this is not just me making stuff up. This doesn't come from my religion. This comes from anthropological studies. And we could talk a little bit about that in a moment. So some of the problems. Let's talk about the state-sanctioned problems. You and I don't own ourselves. And I'm not sure you guys really understand that. We have this, especially in America, we have this imagination that we're somehow free. But it's the farthest thing from the case, because the minute you are born, you are given a tax stamp, a tax ID, a social security number. And the minute you come out of the womb and that paperwork is filled out and your name is there all in caps and you're given a number, that name and that number that you're associated with is legally owned by the government and banks. You may or may not know this, but that's...
Kind of reminds me of... back in child support, we'd have these guys that came into the office, sometimes, well, men and women, and they would talk about how they were like legally not part of the system, so we couldn't do the child support case legally since they're not a U.S. citizen. They were called sovereign citizens. This sounds like very sovereign citizen-ish to me. But yeah, we'd have those guys come in and they'd say like, you can't charge me child support. I'm a sovereign citizen. And therefore the laws are... They had some very complex argument for it, but I'll just give you the short of it is that it never changed anything. Sovereign citizen or not, the child support law applied to them. I never seen a sovereign citizen get out of having to pay.
That's you as a asset, how would you say, liability for the government. The government owns money. Our government, I'm talking about the U.S., but this is like all of Western civilization. This is how we end up in all our world wars and the things that we're doing. And it's part of the reason why life sucks, but I'm not complaining. When you were born, you are held as an entity in lieu of, I can't think about the word, but you represent what the government owes to private banks. The Federal Reserve Bank, the Federal Reserve. You may have heard of the Federal Reserve. We don't own our own money. We actually are deeply in debt, and you are the stand-in for that debt. If anybody remembers the word, tell me down below. It's like you're the collateral. I think that's the word. You're the collateral for the debt, right? Like if you want to buy something, sometimes they'll put your house on collateral. You are on collateral. Not only are you on collateral, but the fruits of your labor are on collateral. That's why you pay taxes.
You know, it sounds a little like, I don't want to say extreme, but far-fetched or whatever, how the whole government as a corporation works. But, you know, I'm sure if you went down the rabbit hole, maybe a lot of this stuff would make sense that he's saying. So I always remember those sovereign citizens. And I remember when sovereign citizen was big. I feel like back in like 2012 and 2013 and around there, sovereign citizen rhetoric was making its way around YouTube. And oh man, they would go, I used to love watching the conspiracy stuff, but they would go deep in it and then talk about how all the way back to the Vatican and all these things and but I'm sure some of this, what he's saying, has some sense to it.
If you are paying taxes, if you have a Social Security number, you are collateral. You are a battery in the system, whether you like it or not. You may not like what the system is doing, but if you work, you earn money, they will come to your house with a gun if you don't pay taxes. And the fruits of your love with your wife are also owned by the government if you put your kids into the tax slave system by having a Social Security number. I know it sounds crazy because it's like, well, who doesn't have a Social Security number? But it wasn't always this way. Now, marriage. Marriage fits under this umbrella of government control through marriage license. And it's all...
See, that's the biggest problem when it comes to this debate of is marriage, right or not between like red pillars or tradcons. It's the marriage that the tradcons talk about as marriage from a long time ago that didn't have this much of the state involved with it. It's like if you get married with the contract, it's like you and your wife and the state are all married together, and that's really the issue.
All born out of the same tax slave system, whether you like it or not. And the way it works is that if you marry a woman, now and you use a state license, you're asserting several things. One of which is the children that you born, they will be a part of this system too. When you sign that marriage license, you're essentially saying the fruit of my labor and the fruit of our love will be given to the government. And if your kids have Social Security numbers like mine do, that name and number, mind you, it's not the entity, the name and the number, in particular the name in all caps legally, and the number. If you write your name in all caps, that's the name that the government owes. Notice when you look at government documents or legal documents with your name on it, it's always in capitals. Because that's what's owned. If you write it with lowercase, it's a different thing.
That's interesting, the capital thing. That sounds a little sovereign citizen to me. Mr. Pitt liked the video. Hey, appreciate that. Yes, please. If anyone's out there watching, please hit the like button. Um, it's like when he talks about this, the social security numbers and stuff like that. Like, I bet that's how it does legally work. I've always kind of had this sort of acceptance of like, I want to be free and everything. Don't get me wrong, but we do live in a civilization that does to some extent guarantee our protection from outside civilizations, right? Like if you weren't part of, let's say, the United States and you just lived on the planet by yourself as your own unit, you and your family, you are still subject to all the dangers that come from the forces of nature and other enemy tribes, I guess. Like, you'd probably get subsumed into some greater power structure sooner than later if you did not create your own power structure. So being born into the United States or whatever country you're born into, the other side of the deal he's talking about your fruits and labors being taxed by the state is supposed to be the protection that the state allows for you to be able to thrive within its borders. But let's keep going. I miss this guy, man. I used to watch him a lot, and I actually really like that. I don't know. I'm just getting a sense of nostalgia seeing this video.
Strange that it's this way, but I've learned this through research, right? So the Federal Reserve, tax ID, when you get married,
One more thing, Mr. Pitt, I just want to say, whenever I start live streaming, I always get this, like, if I feel like nobody's watching, it's like a kind of stage fright, or it's so hard. But when just even one person says something in the chat or says hello, it just changes my energy level, and I just feel so much more confident. So I appreciate you taking the time to say something in there.
Marriage now receives the benefit of a tax status that is beneficial to you. So you're gonna pay fucking taxes anyway. You're gonna marry this woman anyway. So they get you by saying, just sign this paper and you'll pay half the taxes. You won't have to pay as many taxes. Just let us own you, right? And that's how we let people own us. That's why, and I'm not separate from this. I'm not saying this like I'm holier than thou. I'm in the same system, but it's good to be.
Sorry, I didn't see your other comment. The government ruins everything it touches. Marriage is no exception. Yeah, man, that's the truth. Man, I've been thinking a lot about that, and it's just like I want that to be the case, and it's just like everything, anytime government is involved in something, it just adds a layer of complexity, and someone's doing donuts outside of my house, I can hear them. But it just adds this layer of complexity, and the answer is always like, let's get rid of government in marriage, or let's get rid of government in that. And I hate to sound like a pessimist, but I just feel like the tentacles of the state are so deep into marriage and people's relationships that I feel like the only thing, sadly, we can do is to try to adjust the state's tentacles to just make it at least the same amount of painful for both sides, or at least just a little bit more fair for both sides of that equation. Because I just feel like it's so impossible to get the state out nowadays, which is unfortunate. Of course, brother, always here to show support. These streams are top notch. Thank you, man. Appreciate that.
Be aware, because there are things that you can do. You do have a level of autonomy, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Cool. Now, number two, right? So that's from the puppet master, organizational, governmental rules and laws and obligational standpoint, right? Not much you can do with it about it. You're born into this matrix. I'll talk about different ways to finagle in a moment, but you're born into this matrix. Literally as a matrix.
Hey, one more thing, Mr. Pitt, just to share with you. I got this, let me just move this out of the way. I got this new piece of equipment right here. It's pretty cool. It's a PodTrack P4, but it has a section in there where you can put your phone to it. And my hope is that I'm waiting for like 2 more wires to get delivered so I can hook up my phone to it. And then I got one of those like text now numbers or whatever that I want to use so people can do call-ins. Like, I want to put a number on the screen and then people can do call-ins like an old school radio show. Not where they have to like show themselves, but I just want a guy calling in that's like, hey, my name is Bob and I'm from Nebraska and this is my child support story. And then that way they don't have to be embarrassed by showing themselves, and then we can hear, more stuff. So if the stream, God willing, gets bigger, I'd love to incorporate phone calls into it.
But the matrix isn't just a physical matrix, it's a mental matrix too. And so the conception of marriage, people's ideas about marriage, what are the best practices for marriage are totally denigrated. Nobody even knows what a fucking good marriage looks like. That's why I began by saying,
man, that's so true. We're all in this position where we're trying to figure that out, and I feel like the examples for that is like, because when you look around and you think of like popular streamers or whatever, like this guy Elliot Hulse has a good marriage. It's just him and his wife, and he's doing things traditionally, and so far it's worked out, and I think that's great. I hope it works out for him forever. But then you see all these different types of marriages, or you see people's marriages failing. There's like those big celebrity divorces that I like to talk about on my channel. And, they're like, okay, these guys don't got it right, or there's, the feminist, this and that. And then on the other side of the spectrum is like a person like that has an open marriage. The only guy I can really think of someone like that is Destiny. He was pretty popular for that on like the Whatever podcast and stuff. And his open marriage ended up in a divorce too. So it's just like everyone's trying to figure out, like if I say everyone's trying to figure out what it looks like, the first thing that comes into my mind is that people are like, we know what it looks like. It's in the religious texts or whatever. But yeah, even the people who are trying to do it the newest way can't seem to figure it out. And I always just go back to the state. For me, it's just like the laws are just making it heavily imbalanced to one side.
I have the blessing of my parents. We've married. My wife and I basically grew up. She's my high school girlfriend, watching my parents interact. So we have a model for marriage. If you come from a broken home, you have no model for marriage. And we got about 3 or 4 generations of no model for marriage.
And that's so true. If you look at the stats for kids being born out of wedlock, it's at about like almost half kids nowadays are born out of wedlock. And I was just looking at the recent numbers from the Federal Child Support Office, and they were showing some graphs on there. And one of the interesting graphs is they're just taking cases and they were breaking them up generationally. So this is just people who are involved with the child support system in one way or another. And they were showing like for millennials and Gen Z, the people who have cases that are of that generation have the highest rates of never being married. And if you go back to like Gen X and the boomers and you look at their child support cases, it's like a lot of those people were married, or at least previously married, where millennials and Gen Z are like never married. And a lot less of them they came from a marriage that broke down, because a lot fewer of them are getting married. It was just interesting to see that generational divide like manifest somewhere.
Because the model for marriage has been effaced. It's been defaced. And it begins in the late 1950s, early 1960s, but comes to a peak during the sexual revolution. A lot of the things that we take for granted in terms of fornication, right? Like everybody, you're just having sex. It's not a big deal. Just free love, right? Contraception, well, I can blow my load with as many women as I want. Women can just get run through by as many men as she wants. Nothing will happen because there's a piece of plastic or chemical castration that means no babies will come. We're free. But are we? So these are some of the cultural things that we take for granted. What else? That attack, mind you, on the hearts and minds and sanctity of humanity, the family and children, is a literal attack. And this video is not about going deep into the rabbit hole of who and why marriage has been attacked, but it sounds something like Bolsheviks, and it starts with a B. And a lot of the people that perpetuate this unfolding are in our government. They own Hollywood. Dave Chappelle made a stand-up comedy show that was well received by people who are awake, but not so much by the establishment talking about these people. I'm not going to mention what they happen to be in this video. You go figure it out on your own.
I think I know what he's talking about, and man, he better be careful on YouTube. He's been on YouTube for a long time, and if he's saying what I think he's saying, but pretty much the deep state here. It's funny that he calls it an attack, because it's like you can view it as an attack, or you can view it as a kind of organic change in culture. And if it's an attack, then you have to think about what's the best way to defend against this. And if it's just an organic change in culture, then you have to admit that, well, the reason it's doing so bad is because it needs to be updated to match the current culture. But the unique thing about where we live is that we have a lot of different cultures, which I guess I don't want to call them subcultures, but culture has almost been privatized in a way to where there's a bunch of private cultures in their own little bubbles living under the secular umbrella of whatever the United States determines the overarching culture is. And a lot of the traditional conservatives or these people will come in and say, hey, a religion has the answer, and usually for them it's Christianity, so they'll say if you guys both just become Christians, then that's going to solve the problem for you. But we do live in an incredibly diverse country, so for me it's like I don't want to sell any particular religion. I just want to look at how these secular laws affect people's private lives, and if we can redo secular laws in a way that makes sense, then people can practice their religion and marriages privately, ideally, and not have to worry too much about the state ruining things all the time.
But there is an attack, and a lot of them don't even know that they're attacking. So Antonio Gramsci, Mark Lukács, the Frankfurt School, started in Germany, got kicked out for some strange reason in the 1930s, made its way into New York City at Columbia University.
Got kicked out in Germany in the mid-1930s for some strange reason. I think we can put together why that was. Okay, I think I get what he's getting at.
And amongst many of the things that they unfolded was critical theory. And critical theory is critical of everything traditional. That's how you destroy a culture. You criticize it. And so you criticize the religion, you criticize the family by criticizing the father, you criticize all traditional practices, you criticize anything that held the society together, you encourage people to question it or even fabricate stories about the culture.
That's an interesting point about how if traditional roles are criticized, and people have the freedom to do that, then it would lead to a disintegration of those roles in one way or another. And what we've seen recently is this attempt to use evolutionary psychology, I guess, not by the red pill, but I don't know, maybe by the red pill, but also by, if traditional conservatives try to hijack the red pill in order to say that, hey, our religious beliefs are backed up by Evo Psych. You know what I mean? And I don't know. So I got to listen to that one more. Okay, yeah. The other point I wanted to make was about freedom, right? Because I always think about this a lot too. Because growing up in the United States, the value especially that's instilled in you is this idea of freedom, and that the U.S. represents freedom, where other states don't have that. Freedom of speech and freedom of press and freedom of religious belief and all these free markets, all these things. And I keep thinking lately about how one of the ways you can subvert traditionalism in the U.S. is by redefining how the culture views freedom. Because I don't know if this is true, but I've been trying to understand this. I think originally Americans' understanding of freedom was more so a freedom from, but nowadays it's a freedom to. So back then it was like a freedom from what I think was the Church of England, freedom from taxation without representation, basically oppression from the English, and freedom from a lot of these things, right, that people didn't like. And that led to the revolution. at the same time, you know, around 1776, you have the French Revolution coming up, and you were basically seeing this kind of fight against the nobles, and people were tired of this kind of aristocratic freedom from tyranny. Yes, people were tired of aristocratic nobles running things. You know what I mean? Lords and ladies, and we got Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, right? It opens with, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And if you're a Parisian in France during the French Revolution, you would know that if you were rich, it was the best of times, and if you were poor, it was the worst of times. So you see, you know, a move from governance becoming, you know, from aristocratic to something that's more democratic in nature. But freedom from oppression nowadays in the US, I think it's more, freedom is understood more so by the masses as freedom to change your gender, freedom to be in a same-sex marriage, freedom to twerk on a sidewalk, freedom to all these things. And freedom to and freedom from are very different things. And the idea of freedom to do whatever you want is, in my opinion, necessarily against traditionalism. So long as freedom is understood as freedom to do whatever the heck you want, the tree of traditionalism is just going to get axed till it's fallen over.
And you got to remember, our educators are also the enemy. The government educates us, and the government is owned by these Bolsheviks, right? So you got to understand that if we are living in a time where marriage is confusing and marriage is not working, it's not because marriage is bad. It's because it's been bastardized, it has been abused, it has been destroyed. Some of the myths of marriage, I go into great detail in a YouTube video that captured a talk that I gave at the first Patriarch Convention, which is an event that happens here in Florida every once in a while. And if you look it up, it's called Defending Marriage in a Degenerate Age. But some of the myths that we've adopted as a culture under attack, ideological subversion, is that we are actually like bonobo monkeys. And we just hump. And so there's nothing noble about being a human being. You're just a fucking intelligent monkey, and do with your dick whatever you want.
See, that's going to be the evolutionary psychology, or using biology or evolutionary biology as a grounding point for what marriage should look like, for what human relations should look like. And, you know, I might do a reaction to my appearance on Pearl's show, because for one moment on that show, there was like a brief back and forth about marriage being a natural institution. Because on her show, we were reacting to the Michael Knowles debate. And there was a point in there where Michael Knowles specifically said marriage is a natural institution. And I might even do a reaction to that debate. It's just a long one, but I didn't know if I wanted to do that on video or on stream. I might do it as a stream. But I kind of took issue with the idea of marriage as a natural institution. And what he's talking about, I think marriage and monogamy happens because of supernatural influence. So basically religious intervention is what organizes humans into this specific style of relationships. But when he's talking about the bonobo monkeys, I think what he's talking about is, there's a book called Sex at Dawn, and it basically goes into the evolutionary history of humans. And it's the book is kind of centered around like this, saying that monogamy is kind of more mythical for humans than it is actually scientific fact. And bonobos are one of the animals that are discussed in their mating habits. You know, there's chimps, and then there's the bonobos, which I think are a little bit less aggressive in nature. So I think that's what he's getting at with the bonobos, but let's see where he goes.
That sort of attitude where marriage and sex is desacramentalized, meaning it's no longer sacred, leads us to the
See, there we go. This idea of sacred. Sacred and desacramentalization would refer to something that is not just purely natural by definition, right? That has to do with an interplay between natural and supernatural coming together to do something that isn't what just the animals are going to do.
Hole that we find ourselves in right now. So if you're watching this and the things that I'm saying sound so wild and counterculture, even though it's been the way beyond the last maybe 100 years.
See, and he's talking about, like, by taking away what's sacred from marriage, it's led to the shithole. And I mean, this isn't a new idea, you know. This guy who wrote this book over here, Friedrich Nietzsche, I don't know if I can get that to focus, but he wrote a book, I think it was called Twilight of the Idols, but he's the guy who said God is dead. I don't know if you remember that. And what he really meant by that was, like, people aren't living religious in the way they were more superficial, I guess you could say. This is a very terrible retelling, but they're more superficial in the way that they're religious, in the way that they believe in God. And that since God is dead, the idea of a true belief in God is really what holds up all of our different morals and ideals and values. You know, marriage, you can say, is one of those. And if God is dead, then that means the morals and ideals and values are all slowly rotting. And if people aren't truly accepting the sacred into their lives, like if our society isn't really living where God is alive, yet we're trying to live in these traditional ways of living, it's just not going to work, because that sacred energy that keeps our instincts in check to make sure we live this way unfortunately isn't there. So I mean I think I like his videos so far. I miss this guy. It's crazy to see him with white in his hair, man, because I remember when he was a young guy, like, because I was probably in my early 20s and he was probably early 30s. Maybe he was even on YouTube for longer, but I haven't seen him in so long, and it's like he just looks, you know, more wizened, to put it nicely. I didn't agree with Knowles when he said that the only element I think is natural is the demand for exclusivity from your partner, stemming from the desire to ensure paternity. You know, so here's the thing about that. And we both agree. Yeah, I don't agree with the natural institution. I think his thing, so you gotta remember, Pearl and Michael are both Catholic, and I think very possibly there might be a Catholic belief element to it as a natural institution. I'm not sure about the Catholic Church's teachings on that, so that might be why they're kind of both into that. But let me tell you something about exclusivity from your partner. I think to some extent that is true, but there's caveats there, right? Because, okay, like this book, Sex at Dawn, there's a bunch of different theories, right? But the way I tend to look at paternity is that paternity only matters to humanity after private property became a thing, right? And private property, I guess you can say, might be rooted in natural law in terms of like territory. Like animals have territories, you know, like if you have a cat and the cat lives here and then another cat comes, it's gonna be like and chase the other cat away because that's its territory. So they don't build houses, but they do have a territory, and then all the mates and things that happen in there are within its territory. But actual paternity, I mean, like you see lions take out cubs and stuff if they recognize they're not theirs. But I think for humans, what this book Sex at Dawn says, if we're going to take this to be true, and again, it's just a theory, is that humans kind of roved around in these kind of smaller packs, and they were all relatively related to each other. You know what I mean? So they kind of all had sex in common, and it wasn't that big of a deal because, like, me and my cousin, you know, Tom, I don't know, whatever, we look like almost exactly the same. Like, there's very little variation between us. So then the kids are raised in common also. And paternity, in a sense, might not matter as much because I don't have any private property to give over to this kid anyways. You know what I mean? But maybe on like some genetic cellular level of like, get away from me, that's mine. That might be more chimpish, but not very bonobo-ish. And I guess the question is are we more like chimps or are we more like bonobos? But whenever I look at paternity and the importance of it, it has everything to do with like a man's labors and his private property, because you have accumulated property and then you want to pass on that property to somebody that you believe is your heir, and if it's not, then that's a huge problem.
You are a byproduct of the brainwashing. And again, this is not to knock you or to make you feel bad about yourself, but to wake you the fuck up. Because
yeah, I hate to admit it. I mean, you know, I think the older I get and the more I read about stuff, sometimes what I'll do is I will see stuff that I saw from years ago, like even movies, I thought were cool when I was younger. And you tend to realize kind of like some of the brainwashing that occurred even from that, or some of the conditioning. And you're like, man, I can see it now. Oh, shoot. Push the wrong tab.
I see it. I'm a married man. I'm defending marriage in a degenerate age because I know that the attack is not coming from marriage itself. It's coming from the enemies of marriage and the family. Enough said for that. Moving on. So what do we do? How do we behave? And how do we unfold this whole trap? Or how do we navigate it in a resourceful way? So what I'd like to talk to you about is the right way to do things. I'm going to talk to you about proposed solution. So there's a book that's a name that I took the name and slightly changed from much of what I'm about to say. It's called Protecting Your Marriage in a Degenerate Age. And the guy does I forget the name of the author, but he does a great job of destroying some of the myths about marriage, one of which is that it's a religious thing and that it's just, you know, a Roman Catholic kind of made up convention, and that the barbarians never did that. They were...
Maybe he's talking about covenant marriage or something like that, but let's see.
We're just boning women randomly and busting children out, and no one knew who baby belonged to who. That was not the case, never the case. And then also the lie about polygamy. In most cases where polygamy unfolded, that man was responsible for a whole lot of women who would otherwise be in danger without his protection. And I think this has a little bit to do with Muhammad, PBH, and Muslims, and their whole idea about the relationship between men and women having many wives. And it has something to do with the context of the time, and a man who is well off can protect all these women. Now, she might owe him sex or something like that, but we don't have that anymore. And that's not
that's an interesting thing. You know, there's a cartoonish understanding of what polygamy looks like in Islam, and then there's kind of like more so how it actually works. And you know, you see, I mean, I don't know if they're saying this or not, but the more like kind of popular streamers and stuff that are about this, or when it gets talked about, it's just like, oh, just become Muslim and then you can have a bunch of wives, or you can have 4 wives or whatever. It's not very much like that. There's 2 verses in the Quran that very specifically speak about this. And the first verse that discusses polygamy is actually more to do with orphans, you know, and it's about the orphans, but it's kind of like he says, I mean, especially in that time, like there's a lot of war, you know, and a lot of women, their husbands die in the war and they're left with, there's no welfare back then, right? So it's just like, if a population is under a lot of strife like that in war and a lot of the men are dying, it's going to work better if one man is going to be able to marry multiple women, especially if they have kids, because now they can take care of those orphans and give them their just rights. And they can also, I guess, ostensibly repopulate the population faster. And then the women also have someone to then take care of and protect and provide for them in the same way. So it kind of works as a network like that. And then in another place in the Quran, it basically says if you're going to do this, you have to provide for them. I don't have to look up the exact verse, but it says you have to provide for them, you know, in a just way. But then it also says most of you will not be able to do this. Like, it literally says that. So when you look at like Islamic jurisprudence today in a lot of countries, polygamy isn't something that like you could just go and do. Typically, you know, the wife in the marriage contract prior to the marriage, the first wife can add a stipulation that says she doesn't, the husband cannot get married again. And that can be in the marriage contract, and that can be part of the deal. If she does not put that in there, she can divorce if the husband wants to marry someone else, and then that's fine if she wants to do that. And she can go to the court on her own and do that. So, but at the same time, there's all these provisions and things like that, and it's not like everybody's just having this great time being put. What I'm trying to say is it's not a matter of like indulgence. You know what I mean? It's still supposed to be a matter of societal and community responsibility if you're going to do that. And the people who sell it as you're doing this for fun it's not exactly true.
Normal thing. But the truth is that we are pair bonding beasts. That is natural to an elevated creature like we are. A noble creature doesn't behave like a dog. Like my dog will fuck anything with a hole in a heartbeat, but so many of you. And a part of the reason why marriage doesn't...
See, well, there's pair bonding and then there's like sexual attraction. And I guess with us, the closest thing I could think of is there's falling in love with the woman, but then there's being attracted to attractive women, right? And you can almost kind of, maybe the way it presents itself in our society today is like the Madonna whore complex, men have this one object of their affections that they're in love with, or to say it in Jungian terms, what he would call the anima. This is who they've projected as the anima archetype. And that's their object of love, or who they want to give their affections to, the beloved. But then on the other hand, like, they can sit here and watch nude explicit videos and open tab after tab after tab, and be attracted to that. You know what I mean? Or they can sleep with essentially the whores, the Madonna whore complex, a bunch of different whores, and not fall in love with them. And that's what he's talking about. So when he says pair bonding, there's that. The thing I wonder about pair bonding is like, you look at average marriages ending at 7 years, typically the woman. If he says we're pair bonding creatures, then he means like both the man and the woman are pair bonded together. But it seems like around that year of like 5 to 10 or 7 years, the pair bond kind of ends. And then that's where you get these sayings where like marriage is a lot of work. You know what I mean? Like, well, marriage isn't easy, or after the honeymoon phase, then marriage is a lot of work and all these things. And I don't know, I was talking to someone and actually about this, and she was saying, because going from the sex at dawn, the blimp, bro, go get a job. I have a job. And man, if you don't say anything constructive, then I'm just gonna have to hide you from the channel. But that's about it. Also, so she was saying, like, going back to the sex at dawn thing and humans living close together in these relationships, that pretty much around that time that it disintegrates, the child is no longer a baby and is old enough to be running around, walking around, and being taken care of by the community at large, and then the pair bond dissolves. So let's see, the blip bro, go get a job. I'm just gonna hide him from the channel now. Screw it. Hide user on this channel. Okay. And he's gone. He's gone. I should probably put out rules for this, but, basically it translates to don't be an asshole and you'll be okay over here. Let's get back to it.
Work is because of that. Once again, sex was weaponized with contraception and abortion and divorce and all this other shit. So if you think that you're anti-feminist, but yet you're boning chicks who are chemically castrated, you're a promiscuous man living your best life being an alpha, guaranteed you're a feminist, because the feminist weapons have allowed you to behave in the way that you behave, which is undignified completely. Marriage to one woman and raising children with her is not only the dignified way, but the biological right way. Once again, read the book, do your own research, see what actually works in a culture. When a culture is family-oriented and pair-bonded and they stay married forever, the society thrives. That's a masculine society. That's a patriarchy. Father rule. shit doesn't go sideways. Although the feminists have lied to us in many instances about what that actually is. Part of the way you get the sexual revolution is by creating oppressed classes. And so a lot of what we got in terms of the destruction of the family today comes from a narrative that began unfolding in Seneca Falls in the 1890s that positioned women as oppressed and men as oppressors. It was never that way. Women loved their position as being provided and protected for by men. You see, there's a sort of a trad movement with women happening slightly today. It's not totally trad, but they want the trappings of a traditional marriage. I get to stay home and raise my children. They want that. But yet the damage in many ways is too deep to change their psyche, so that solipsism, I can't even say the right word, but this, nature within women that allows them to imagine that they're always right and put themselves in a position where they'll destroy a family and feel justified, right?
I'm glad he said that about the trad wives, because there's a lot of the trad wives kind of coming back lately. But every time I see the trad wife thing, man, it doesn't feel genuine to me. It feels like almost a clown putting on makeup. Because what they'll do is they'll go on TikTok and they'll make videos of them being a housewife, and they look like they're like a 1950s housewife. But it's like our society doesn't even organically make those. You know what I mean? So it's like they're just trying to play a character, and it just comes off as really, really weird. And I'm glad he called them out, because it's like they want all the benefits of tradition, but they're still undercover feminists. John made that video, Undercover Feminists. It's complicated. That's the guy's name, John. And he points this out, because it's like they'll be like, well, we want a man to do all these things, a real man. But then, like you say, after the 7 years, then all of a sudden they're undercover feminists the whole time, and they're gone. So it's like, if women are supposed to be protected from the men, the problem is that now they have more protection from the state. So it's easy for them to just get out of the man's deal and just go to the state, and the state does whatever the state's going to do for them. Trad wives are a LARP. Yeah, definitely. It doesn't feel like an authentic thing. If trad wives really cared, they would be helping men to get the laws changed, is what they would be doing, so I just kind of doubt it. I think they just maybe see that a lot of this red pill manosphere stuff is popular now, and they're like, okay, Kevin Samuels said men want this, and they're just trying to market themselves as a trad thing. And I've noticed just from dating that when you look at women's profiles, especially at a certain age, they start to try to present themselves as a, religious and traditional when they're trying to lock someone down at like age 29. So I guess that means the secret to a long-lasting marriage is figuring out how to stay committed after the good feelings are gone after 7 years. Yeah, I definitely think so. And, that's where the quote-unquote hard work comes. I'd hate to call it that, man. I think marriage is great, man. And I always kind of told myself, as crazy as this sounds, even after working at child support, that, hell, I guess if I found someone that, like, I'm like, okay, I would only marry someone that has a decent job. I'm not providing for nobody 100%. I would just walk through the fire and do it, even if that meant something tough down the road. Because it's like, people do want it. Yo, John, welcome in. It's complicated. Thanks for commenting, man. Why were the tradcons never an issue when it came to women's liberation, but it is when it comes to men's liberation? Doesn't that prove that tradcons cater to feminism and allowed it to get worse? That's a great point, man. When it comes to men trying to be liberated, the tradcons are doing everything to stop it. In my video yesterday, I pointed out how, that Michael Knowles clip when he's talking to Pearl, and she asked him about if a man finds out that the kid isn't his, do you think he should stay married? Shouldn't he get divorced? And Michael Knowles is like, divorce is never okay. And then he goes on to say, like, red pill is just the flip side of feminism, and that it's liberal in a lot of ways, And what the tradcons don't like is that they'll say red pillars are feminists, but but they're really not. Red pillars are just reacting to what feminism put on the table, right? So feminisms are like, women, abandon your traditional roles. And now red pill men are like, hey, every time I'm traditional, I get screwed for it. And red pillars are abandoning their traditional roles. So tradcons are mad at men. It's a problem because it's men's liberation, just like you say. But they didn't do anything to stop the women's liberation. And in fact, if you ask many of those tradcons, like, they'll be like, well, I think first wave feminism was good. You know what I mean? Well, yeah, I mean, well, women were oppressed. They didn't get to have bank accounts and this and all that kind of stuff. And tradcons are undercover feminists, actually, from the beginning, because they want it both ways. They want to be able to say traditionalism's good, but they also want to be able to say women were actually oppressed. And they somehow synthesize this together over at the Daily Wire. And it doesn't make sense. And there is this problem of traditionalism. It's like, what traditionalism are you talking about? Because some aspects of traditionalism are necessarily oppressive. It's like, slavery was a thing for a long time. If you look at the Spartans, they'll be like, oh, men have to be like Spartan soldiers. Well, if you ever read about Spartan history, every Spartan had 10 slaves. I think they're called helots. I can't remember, helots, or there was the parakoi, which was like the middle class, and I think the slaves might have been called helots. It's been a while. But they had a bunch of slaves that were sitting there working the farm for no money. You know what I mean? And that's how a Spartan got to be a Spartan. So it's like, if Spartanhood is a paragon of masculine excellence, then are we all getting some helots to work the fields for us and to do our jobs while we focus on, these things? So there are undercover feminists in so many ways, and it's just keep whipping the men and not hold the women accountable, and that's how we are where we are. Now they're fighting against men who are trying to make conditions better. Exactly, because they're in denial. They're in denial that they lost. They lost to the feminists. The feminists have changed the world, and men now need to adjust to the new social order, and that's what it is.
Neither here nor there. So, what did we do before? Well, one place we could potentially look is the book that Western civilization, Christendom, is built on, the Bible. Whether you like it or not, your deepest moral and values and virtues are biblical. It's from the Bible. I mean, like it or not. So at least take a look and see what that blueprint hath unfolded. Two places you can look, old and new, of course. Old, there is the story of Isaac and Rebekah, which is like kind of one of the first examples of a marriage and how it happened back in those days. And a lot of you guys are gonna say, whoa, boy, fuck, I got a lot of wives right now. The way it was considered was that when a man and a woman join together and have sex, they're married. And so as the story goes, I think Isaac's father it wasn't Abraham, Isaac. Abraham sent his servant out to go find a wife for his son. Check that out too. Parental involvement, big piece of the pie I'm going to talk about in a moment. Sent his servant out, go find my son a wife. And the servant did his great job finding the right woman. He had vetted her perfectly to be the woman that would marry King Abraham's son, Isaac. And as the story goes, the whole vetting process unfolds right there in the book of Genesis. Then he takes that girl after she consults with her parents, right? Notice, Isaac's parents and her parents were consulted. Big part of the missing piece right now. And then she leaves with the servant and goes and meets her new husband. She goes into the tent, he goes into her, they're married.
Man, it's so interesting thinking about that, because it's like, people are like family. And really what people are arguing over is the nuclear family. You know what I mean? And about how important the nuclear family is. But it's like, I feel like in the 50s, the nuclear family was separated from the extended family. And that was kind of the beginning of the end when you really think about it. Because what he's describing about the parents of the people, the man and the woman to get married are involved in this, and what they say matters. is so important, because people are out here dating on their own to try to make a nuclear family, but it doesn't involve the other party's parents, or your own parents, and understanding how the extended families would work together as a part of the overall community together. So, I guess that's why the state's involved now.
How many bitches you boning right now that you would call your wife? Probably not many. So, but that's the way it was. And then it goes a little bit further in Corinthians 6:16 through 17, where Paul describes how when a man goes into a prostitute, he is joined to that prostitute. So if you're boning these broads, whether for pay or for play, you're married to her, because
man, I hear something kind of funny. I write my dreams down every morning. So I write my dreams on my phone and I email them to myself. But I had this dream a few years back, and I remember in the dream I think I saw one of my buddies, or I was talking to him. And he was telling me that when you have sex with somebody, you change your stars, meaning like your astrology, and if you have your stars, and it determines what your life is, almost like changing your destiny in a way. But when you join with somebody like that, your stars are changed, basically. And I always think about that, whenever I'm with somebody. I mean, and it does work like that, especially when emotions get involved and things like that. And when you're having sex with anybody on a long enough timeline, not even that long of a time, emotions are part of it. But I always remember that. It's like your life changes in a way when you're with anybody, or whoever you're with, basically.
There is a karmic connection. There's a depth of exchange that happens. We're not just bumping ugly beasts. We're divine, noble creatures. So that's a new conception. I'd like to impart that upon your way of thinking, right? Marriage itself, traditionally, I know you mentioned tradition. He says, I want to do tradition. It says tradition, but as most people who don't understand tradition, they leave out the church. Everything in Western tradition, everything in Western civilization, for the past 2,000 years, its tradition is found from the church. But I know that's a hard thing to understand. There's a great book called How the Catholic Church Created Western Civilization. Just facts, but facts are opinions these days, so if you don't like what I'm saying, who cares? Marriage would happen, first of all, as a community vow. These two people are saying in front of the community, not the state, in front of their community, i.e. church, that we agree to be one thing. And we're asking your blessing to sacramentalize this through the church so that we can go into the marital act with all of the blessings from our society and grace from God. So
it's not even, I used to think about, it's not even just that. Like, I mean, obviously it's that too. It's getting the blessings, very important. And, but it's also like, hey, everybody, these two are a thing now, just so you know. So there better not be any excuse or funny business going on. We all came here and witnessed that these two are a thing. We had the cake. We witnessed it.
Traditionally, the marriage had more to do with the community and God than it had to do even with the church. The church didn't create marriage. The church just sacramentalized marriage. It was between those people and the community saying, we're going to do it and we're going to do it right through. The church then comes in and says, let us bless you. Let us bless you. Let us bring God. And this is all the work of Christ. When he goes to the wedding of Cana, he, in essence, sacramentalized marriage by turning the water into wine. Different story. But the Christians adopted that as a belief that, oh, God wants marriage, and God wants to be a part of marriage, and God will elevate your marriage, turn water into wine, if it's sacramentalized, so there's a blessing that happens through the church. I would not get into a marriage without the community's support and love. And that's when you get married and the community support and love is a part of it. It means you will always go, you're willing to go to the wise people of your society, of your tribe, before you take any marriage fucking counseling. What did we do before counseling? We went to elders. We went to our community. We don't have community. We don't have elders anymore. I get it. It's a fucking shame. But we didn't go to therapists. Therapy? Are you
You know, it's interesting when I think about it, because with so many broken families nowadays, a lot of the people who are trying to pair up and do a traditional thing are coming from a home where maybe it was a single parent home, or they don't have much extended family, or they don't really have that relationship to begin with. And it's just, we don't live in this perfect world where everybody's coming from their two parent households and coming together to make a new two parent household. People are out here kind of just playing it by ear and winging it. Now, one good thing about religion is religion's supposed to be a place that takes people who are broken and then helps them be able to live by these traditional standards. So I like religion for that. I don't like it when religious... I have this thing I've been telling myself lately, and I don't even know if it's true, but I keep saying that I love religion, but I don't like religious people. Because religious people can be really annoying. But it's like, people do have a past, but then if they become religious, religion's supposed to be for that, I think. It's supposed to be to take people who were broken before, whatever their past is, and then help them have that relationship with God, and then be able to fit into some kind of traditional mold once they're held to that standard. I don't know how well that's going on nowadays, maybe not so well, but yeah, I'm just commenting that, there's the starting point that we're at for a lot of people already. It's like, they might not have that father figure that's going to do the negotiation part of it for their marriage. And a lot of women get screwed too, because they'll marry some guy, and it's like, if their dad, I think he mentioned this, if their dad looks at that guy that they want to marry, they'd be like, hell no, you shouldn't marry that person. But here we are.
Fucking kidding me? You're gonna go speak to a woman who's never been married herself, or has had 3 divorces, who has babies out of wedlock, who's got a high degree at a liberal university, to arbiter your failing marriage? That's what most people do. But back in the day, because the community was a part of it, you went back to the community, you say, hey guys, we're having a hard time here. And the elders, people who have been married for 50, 60, 70 years, who understand the struggle, but made it through, they would counsel you.
They wouldn't just counsel you, they'd probably also counsel the woman and hold her up to some standard. Both of you guys, really, but, that's gone.
So the destruction of the family is a destruction of the community too. You understand that, right? It's not just, when you destroy the family, you destroy that whole social structure. No elders. They're all old, broken, and in homes. Old folks' homes. So everything kind of falls apart. So community vow, church sacramentalization, the way it started becoming a state thing, just fun fact, is the church would just keep a record. Oh yeah, we record that this happened on this day and these people made this vow. But then...
Probably good for like genealogy reasons and knowing who's who, and as families become more extensive. Not to mention, Christianity, it's monogamy, right? So it's like, if someone gets married and then maybe they want to get married to someone else, they'd be like, hold on a second, your name's already in here. Though I imagine even back then you can probably go to a church out of town and maybe get away with that.
As is today, when things go astray, the government and the church come together, or the government imposes itself on the church and says, hey, I know you got those records. I want to know every single one of those motherfuckers that got married, and I'm going to keep them in my census. Because there's power associated with it, right? So, anything that becomes institutionalized becomes destroyed, because every physical institution is a fallen institution. So the church is a fallen institution also, right? The church, the government, all institutions are fallen institutions, meaning they literally fell into the third dimension where there's limitation. So that's why we live in a sinful state, right?
I like his way of wording that. Falling into the third dimension where there's limitation, like falling into materialism from like a spiritual thing. But yeah, overall, I mean, secular law is what rules the day out here. You know, in the heyday of traditionalism, I'm sure if someone did something out of pocket, the church can actually make a punishment for them, where now everything runs through the secular courts, and it ain't changing anytime soon.
Fallen world. And it's not about fixing the fallen world. It's about how do we best navigate this bitch so we don't fuck things up.
Exactly. And that's what the red pill guys are doing. It's like, holy crap, this is bad. What's the best course of action here? Like, at least strategy wise, like, how do I avoid the major problem?
Solutions, best practices. Man, this is gonna be a long video. Best practices. I'm not even going to explain. I'm just gonna drop these and let you guys clean up the mess. Number 1, no sex before marriage. No sex before marriage. People who have sex before marriage have a higher incidence of getting married later and falling apart because we live in a culture of bone and go. So if it doesn't work out, we leave. But if the prize is at the other end of the commitment, well, you know who actually wins? The man. When sex is inside of marriage, and men are the ones who decide to marry, not all this new bullshit where women are getting on their knees. Men are the ones that decide to marry.
That's the craziest thing. Whenever I saw a picture lately of a woman proposing. Let me see if I can find it. Women proposing, like the woman on her knees, and kind of like, there was like a famous one that happened recently. Damn it. Oh well. Yeah. Basically like this though. You know what I mean? Where the woman's doing it. And the first thing I always think of is she's proposing, so does that mean she's paying all the bills too, or is it like just she's proposing, right? Because it's like, if she's proposing, then I mean, I don't know. Maybe she's gonna be the provider too. Who knows? If some woman came to me and was just like, hey, I'm going to pay all your bills and all these things, and I'm going to propose to you, and I make a lot more money than you, I might accept that. Might be like, all right, well, as long as you're physically attractive.
And sex is inside of marriage, men are actually the gatekeepers. When sex is outside of the marriage, women are the gatekeepers, and then marriage becomes a sort of optional thing. But if you want to get the goods as a man, and you want to keep it in a resourceful way and actually have a family, don't fuck her before you marry her.
That works traditionally, but the important thing is if the woman is following that same standard. So a man can do that and then get married, but if she's already been, all around town, then, we got a problem.
If she's already got a past, well, that brings us to the next piece of advice, right? Marry early. Get married early and stay early, because the earlier you marry, I know this is counterculture, but just bear with me. This is my opinion. The earlier you marry, the less sex partners both of you are going to have, the less mistakes you're going to have. And even if you tell a teenage person who's bubbling with hormones that this is the best practice, they're not going to listen, because the music they've been listening to in the Disney movies have been telling them, oh, you have to fall in love and have sex to have an enjoyable life. But at some point, they're going to realize, oh, wow, the traditional way, oh, wow, what my parents say, it's actually right. And you don't want to wait till you're 24, 34, 40 fucking 4 before you are a born-again virgin and I'm trying to do it the right way.
I agree with him when he says get married early. I look back at that and I'm like, yeah, the best way is to get married early. And I think as far as this works, if you're already past it, like, and you're going to get married later, honestly, like, I mean, but see, it still doesn't matter because the way the laws are. But for me, it's like I would not sign that contract unless she's making as much, if not more money than me. Something comparable. The greatest thing about America, at least growing up, is that there was this idea of equality. I was talking about how the definition of freedom changed from freedom from to freedom to. This is another one of those things. We were all kind of indoctrinated to believe that we're all equal. And in the eyes of the law, we are, and that's true. But that doesn't mean we don't have a class system here. There is classes, whether you want to admit this or not. There are people here, there's economic classes. People here, and there's people way all the way up there. And if you're going to get married, you should marry someone that's in your same class, because when the divorce happens, it's going to be a lot more smoother, especially if it happens sooner rather than later. Now, you guys could get married and then you have a business that gets fantastically rich, and well, that's what happens. But
no sex before marriage, and then also marrying early. That's the point. If we're going to bring sex, we're going to have sex. We're going to do it in marriage, and I want to have sex with you because I'm at my prime. Let's get married. Now you say, oh, but people are so young, they don't know much about themselves. How could that marriage work? Ah, my friend, unfortunately, you don't know tradition. Fortunately, I do. So, let me go a little bit further before I explain that. No cohabitating. Ask the parents. So no cohabitating goes along with no sex before marriage and marrying early. Ask the parents. The reason why parents get involved with the marriage, the reason why you should ask the father, the reason why the father gives the yes or no to that girl whether she can marry somebody is because the parents have their best interest in mind.
Really is true. But, the tough part, again, with a lot of people, not most, is that a lot of people out here are so separated from their parents, or they're in a single parent home, or the father's not in the house, or the daughter never talks to her dad again or something like that. And there's not really this dad to ask, or, it's just mom's new boyfriend that's not even really her father. It's just a gigantic mess out here. But overall, I mean, it's not wrong.
Now, I'm not saying your parents know everything and that you have to listen to everything that your parents say. You're going to do what you want to do anyway. But there was a time when marriage lasted because the parents were involved. Now, mind you, if your parents are divorced and they come from divorced parents and they don't know shit from fuck about marriage and making it work, then I get it.
There you go.
We don't have any elders. But if things start unfolding in the right way, or you create a community, or you become a part of a community that wants to do things the right way, you ask the parents. Because
I don't want to say that makes me feel a little bad inside, but it kind of the way he said that, it's more in the sense of like, oh my God, we're so far down this road of being screwed over. It's like the state is basically the parent at this point, especially for a lot of women. But with the family system broken down as far as it is, I mean, to me, it kind of leaves me with this pessimistic understanding of there really is no way to solve this other than to change state laws, because the state is going to be there, unfortunately, especially if these people's parents aren't going to be there.
Parents are actually worth listening to. I get it. Most parents aren't worth listening to today. The parents are actually worth listening to. You want to consult with wise counsel, and also your parents have your best interest in mind. Like my daughter, if she shows up here with a guy that I can clearly see is a slapdick and isn't going to fulfill what I know she needs, because oftentimes parents know their children better than children know themselves. And that's not a bad thing. It's that the parents love you so much that they're observing you, and sometimes you can't see yourself. Also to the young man. So if he comes, he's a slapdick, I'm going to have to tell her, I don't think it's a good fit. I don't think it's a good fit. But most dads don't have that type of authority anymore. You got the responsibility if that shit breaks up, but you have no authority unless you fucking take it.
Exactly. There's no authority. I mean, and if you take it, then, you might end up in jail.
By saying, I'm speaking up. What father has to say is very important. Even if what you say goes in one ear, out the other, you still must say it. That brings us to deep vetting. You got to know what this woman's values are if you're going to make it work. And that means religion. And I know people hate it because you might not be thinking about religion right now, but if you marry a woman from another religion, or you marry someone who has religion and you have not, the topic of God is the topic of everything. It's the overarching of all things. Because your worldview is going to be precipitated by your spiritual view. So if you're dealing with somebody and y'all have totally different spiritual values, it's probably not going to work. You got to speak and you got to agree. You got to agree on a lot of things before you decide to marry this person. And most people don't have those conversations. They're not.
He's right. You guys got to have the same values. Now it's a question of whether do values change or not. Now, what the religious person would say against this is, well, you guys weren't praying together every day, just 7 minutes. You know what I mean? And her values changed or your values changed because you guys weren't doing religion the right way.
Not willing to have those conversations. You got to talk. I know guys who married women that didn't know that their wives were liberal until the pandemic. All of a sudden, their wives are walking around with masks and telling them they need to take the shot. I'm like, whoa, what? They're like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, I didn't realize how different our values were. I don't understand these homes. This is why I get in trouble sometimes for talking about women shouldn't vote. There should be one vote from a family because the family should have the same values. So that's another best practice. That's a lost practice. Lost best practices: no sex before marriage, marry early, no cohabitating, talk to the parents, vet deeply.
See, it's a lost practice, but it's like, is the practice ever coming back? If it's not coming back, then we have to adjust radically. I mean, he's discussing traditional ways of doing things, but oh man, I don't know. You know, I don't want to say it won't work. I mean, if you find a pocket of traditional people and you're part of a tight-knit community like that, then I think you guys can weather the storm somehow. But there is just this constant corrosive acid being thrown over and over and over again on any traditional values out here, especially if you live in the U.S., which is just like a blender. Like, just throw a bunch of cultures and a bunch of traditional values and a bunch of liberal stuff and a bunch of stuff into a big blender and then put a cap on it and that's what you get.
Final piece here, modern best practices. What do you do if you want to make this shit work in a day that's so degenerate that it don't?
All right, here we go.
Number one, you're involved with the law regardless. Even if you don't marry and you live together, even if y'all just talk on the fucking phone and FaceTime and you're millions of miles away, there's a way that a woman could finagle and say that you owe her something. I've seen it happen. There's shit in the news about it.
Appreciate him saying that. He's right. You know, if you don't get married, I mean, cohabitation does bring a whole nother layer into this.
Right? So bottom line, if you're boning a bitch, the government thinks that you're married. She can find a way to make it that way. You could be responsible for children that aren't even yours, right?
Absolutely.
So what do? Before you go down too many deep rabbit holes or up into her wormhole, you should craft some legal documents. Because the law is involved either way, except if you take proactive action and then get involved, at least you can choose the fair conditions. Let's choose some fair conditions. And this is not about power. This is about defending against an attack. So you got to create some legal document. If you're going to marry her, right, and you're not going to do the whole state sanctioned thing, which I don't blame you, you still have to do a state sanctioned thing because you're going to have to hire a lawyer, you're going to have to craft a contract. There's no other way about it. Because doing nothing is doing something. And listen, I like the traditional way.
It's an interesting thing. At first, I thought he was talking about a prenup if you get married in the state-sanctioned way, but he's saying without a state-sanctioned marriage license certificate to still have some kind of contract. I mean, you know, I could see that working if it comes into convincing her to do that, to get married, in the sense of like, all right, spousal support's never going to be a thing for you, but I will agree to split the house with you if this ends. Or I will agree to give you some amount of money if this ends. And I could see that being a thing that some people might do. I think some people even kind of do put that in their prenups already. But, you know, the dangerous part about that is if the prenup gets thrown out. Aside from that, I mean, there's already laws that you can do nothing about, regardless of any private contract you guys have. Child support, the way paternity works, and the way custody works are all laws that are outside of the marriage certificate and specific marriage laws. All that stuff exists outside of that. So all that stuff applies to a boyfriend and a girlfriend who has a kid anyways. So, you know, I'd probably err on the side of no contract, but depending on who the person was and what it was. I mean, I can see myself possibly writing a contract, that's not too terrible sounding to me.
I like traditional Catholic marriage. If I could have it that way, of course, I'd say that would make my day, and it'd be great for everybody except the gays. But you're going to do it today. You got to craft a fair agreement. I don't like it. That's what you got to do. Number 2, don't bind to a woman without protection. Same sort of thing. I'm not talking about wearing condoms. I'm talking about you need legal protection. Number 3, stay married so you never have to deal with any of this stupid shit. And staying married begins with the stuff I said before about who to choose to get married and who to involve in your marriage and what to think about before you get married. And I'm not talking about thinking with your lower head, your upper head. Stay married. Stay married. I don't understand these people that get married and then they get married a second time after a divorce. Marriage is meant to be forever. Think about the first chick you boned. In God's eyes, that's still your wife. I don't know. But you get what I'm saying. Don't take it light. Imagine the first girl you had sex with is actually your wife. God's like pulling her up from like high school. Like, hey, remember her? That'd be.
Reminds me of a funny story. Sometimes I have this weird, like, fantastical thought where, like, I'm in a room or something, or almost like a judgment thing, and you see every single woman that you were ever with standing next to each other, like in the same room. And I have a buddy who, back in college, he went down south for college. And I remember him telling me that, like, once at a party, there was 4 women that showed up that he had all slept with. And, like, it was just, I don't even know. It was just, like, this funny thing. And that must be awkward.
Bad. Stay married. And a part of the way you stay married is by working with the sacraments and the sacrilege of destroying a marriage through the church. One of the things that makes the Catholic faith and orthodoxy so attractive to me is its rigor. And a part of the rigor means that there's a definition for certain things, and everything isn't arbitrary, right? And at least Catholics are the only ones that really maintain that marriage is indissoluble. Protestants, so all the other religions that you're allowed to marry. Of course, there's finagling ways, and you could just leave the church, so it doesn't matter. But if you truly are a person of faith, and you're not just living faith, listen, living the faith is inner and outer. It's not just an inner thing. That's why people who say all you got to do is believe and you're good. No, that's not it. How do you conduct yourself? And if you're a person of faith that conducts himself spiritually and within the matrix of the world in a spiritual way, then you're going to want to sacramentalize your marriage. You're going to want to get that blessing from your marriage. You're going to want to receive the graces that come through the sacraments of matrimony to help your marriage last. And so that's it. That's all. That's just my opinion, y'all. Do with it what you want. Done.
That was pretty fun. Let's see what the comments were. I got to go back and watch a lot more of his videos. His name's Elliot Hulse. If you're wondering, I can show you. Elliot Hulse. He's been around for a long time. But let's go ahead and see. If the woman asked her, I did view this once before, but I think I looked at the comments, but I can't remember. If the woman asks for marriage, she's planning for divorce. So if the woman proposes, oh man. You know what, man? I have this problem where if I see anything with 9s, I have to hit the like button. See, now it's at an even 300. All right. We read that one earlier. Never get into a contract where one of the parts is motivated and incentivized to break it. A random guy on the internet said so. That was me. I wish I knew this before marriage. From India. Same stuff here. Oh, man. Well, they got them too. Dudes need to start mastering the difference between a legal marriage, a non-legal church marriage. Honestly, I agree so much with what that guy's saying. It would be nice if you could trust the system, not so much the woman, because the woman can either cheat herself out of a good relationship or not. We should be aiming towards one goal, and that is to make divorce as easy as it was to marry. Shouldn't have to take psychologists, podcasts, or decoders to figure this issue out. He's right about that, but tradcons will never want to hear that because to them, all they hear, I think Michael Knowles said this in his debate with Pearl, is that it just makes it easier for men to leave. He doesn't want to make it easier for men to leave marriage. Because then in his eyes, it just hurts the institution of marriage as a whole. Even though women have an easy out, he doesn't want to make it easier for men to, what he says, leave marriage. But really what he's missing is that it's easier for men if they end up in a divorce. You know, he just still wants it to be very costly for men, even though it's not costly for women, which is stupid. It should be costly for both. Well, we've had enough of that comment. Marriage is stability and retirement to women, but overtime and responsibility to men. That's funny. Women are incentivized to divorce the husband. Yes, we've seen that. As a man in today's world, you'd have to be absolutely insane to get married. Why would you enter? See, this is state marriage. Why would you enter a contract that the other party is incentivized to break? A man has nothing to gain from marriage and everything to lose. Yeah. They are not waging war against marriage. They are waging war against God. Okay, well, that guy's ready to pick up his helmet, shield, and sword any day. My ex-wife used to brag about, you never bought us a house. You never did this, blah, blah, blah. After I got divorced, I said to myself, damn, good thing I never didn't have any assets. Now I can't share shit. Learned my lesson, though. Good. Renting was the way for him. Oh, here we go. Take it from me, who went through 7 years of hell due to marriage. If you know anything about contracts, it's easy to tell the contract for marriage is stacked against the odds of a man. If she wants to cheat with whoever, she will and get away with it. See, that's the thing, because people are like, well, if the man cheats, then he should lose everything. It's like, yeah, but if a woman cheats, she still gets everything. So that kind of undoes that. If she wants to cheat with whoever, she will. Yo, Trevor. Hey, good to see you, bro. Finally caught one live. Good to see you, man. Deuce Volt intensifies. Exactly. The Deuce Volt guys. I can see the memes now. You know what I mean? Like, you know, it's like a guy on a horse and he's got his Crusader outfit going on. And it's like, I get it. But, you know, can we do something about the laws? If she wants to cheat with whoever, she will and get away with it, and then take half of your possessions. And if you have a kid, you have an even bigger unfair contract for 18 plus years. My advice is definitely find somebody who you love and could spend the rest of your life with the government contract out of it. Be loyal to each other without a doubt, be honest. But if you really think about it, there's no need for illegal government contract. There really isn't. And the tough part is explaining that to the woman, you know. If she's making as much, if not more than you, she's going to be very likely to be like, yeah, let's just do the religious thing, you know. I'll be honest about myself. I always kind of come back to this in the sense of like, I don't want to tell people not to get married, because I feel like in my mind, if I met a decent woman that I'm attracted to, she works, she has a good, listen, I'm not rich. I'm part of the normal mass of people here, which means a household is going to take 2 incomes. But if I find someone like that and it makes sense, then I would walk through the fire. I always told myself that when I was working at child support, no matter how bad the case was, I always did look at the guys who were getting screwed and think, you know what, at least this guy has a kid. And I know it's easy for me to say, because I don't have any kids, you know, and maybe it sucks so badly if you do have a kid, but then you can't see the kid. See, that's another thing. And then a guy might pull the, you know, the whole parachute out on life here. But so that's easy for me to say, which is why I've avoided these things. And it's, I don't know. I can still see myself walking through the fire, but without the state contract. I'll be like, all right, you know what? Okay, I'm gonna give it a good shot. My marriage desanctified marriage for me. I wonder what he means by that. I did what I was supposed to do, and it didn't matter at all. Now it's over, and I have to start rebuilding in my 50s. That sucks. No man should get married under the current system. I'm going to give him a like, so I feel bad for that guy. Dude, I remember watching you when I was in high school. Yeah, I remember this guy. I'm so glad you're still posting and you've ascended like you have. Love all your stuff. My gym owner is losing his house. He just built 3 years after he told me he won getting married. Wow. Stop thinking you are going to be exempt, gentlemen. Use your brain, not your emotions. Absolutely true. I've done it twice, and no way in hell would I do it again. I'm 54 and done with marriage. I've never had this much peace and money my entire life. Good for him. And it's like, you know, this guy's got married and divorced twice, and he's still 54. I mean, you know, he probably wants woman companionship. So what does that mean? That means that he's gonna be with women outside of marriage, and that's just the way it is. It's easier for a guy like that because he has his kids already, and you know, he's on the other side of that, so he can do what he feels like. And there's gonna be plenty of women who will do that with him, but you know, if it's from a religious point of view, they're going to be like, that's bad. You shouldn't do that, you know, but here he is. I encountered a woman working in a little boutique in Florida who didn't have a social security number. That's interesting. Maybe she's probably from down south a bit. I spent almost 2 hours listening to her talk about the things you're talking about in this video and how she functioned in life without a SSN, postal address, certificate of birth, or anything that would make her owned by the state. She stressed that there is a difference between birth certificate and certificate of birth, although I don't recall all the details. It was a lot of information to take in at once, but it was absolutely fascinating and eye-opening. I wonder what the difference between a certificate of birth and a birth certificate is. That does remind me, though, a lot of the child support cases, not a lot of them, but every now and then I'd run into them where it was an undocumented person, you know, that was in the system. So this person doesn't have a social security number. And, man, yeah, the system did not apply to them the same way. I'll tell you that. And what a lot of these guys did is they would be assigned a social security number to it. This was a really weird thing I noticed because I would see it in the system. So sometimes we'd have an undocumented, I could just say immigrant, whatever, in the system because they got someone pregnant and we had a case for them. And when I'd see the person's employment or income list and I'd see what kind of money they're making, sometimes they'd have income coming in that had nothing to do with them. And I'm like, hey, that's not the person. That's a different person's social security number. And what they would tell me to do is just mark that as fraudulent and then disregard any of the income. And because we don't want our system messing with this guy who exists and is alive now working because this migrant is using his social security number. So I don't even know why they did this, but for some reason there are a lot of immigrants or migrants that are here working in another corporation, I think is fraudulently using their social security number to make it look like they're a legitimate employee. It's super weird. And sometimes there'd be these weird things where like a person that's alive with that social security number is now being attributed this income. It was super weird, and the child support office didn't know what to do about it. So we just had a thing in the system that just marked it as fraudulent so it wouldn't port over data anymore. I found marriage is incompatible with FIRE. Financial independence. Yeah. Retire early unless you find a partner who is as committed. Honestly, man, it's not compatible with that. But the only way it is if like you find a partner who also has her own income and her own stuff she's afraid of losing. Because then if you guys get married, she has just as much stake in it. In any case I ever saw where the woman made more money, I swear to God, all this stuff about female nature and women being emotional and all this shit goes out the window when they know they're going to lose money. When they know they're going to lose money, they're suddenly very reasonable. All of a sudden, they're not the ones who are pushing for divorce. They're just like, they're meeting with the lawyer and they're like, what do I do about this? You know, if I ever get married, it would be to someone like that who makes as much, if not more money. And the divorce would be cake. The only thing that would be tough is custody. You know what I mean? She might try to pull some stuff where it's like, oh, you know, she wants to get full custody so she doesn't have to pay child support. She might try convincing the kids to go live with her instead of dad or living with her full time. And it's always so that they can avoid child support. But I'd rather just fight a custody case than worry about losing, you know, whatever I have or worry about alimony. It's easier to pay child support when you're not paying alimony. Hey, by the way, Trevor, I want to show you this fun piece of equipment I got. I don't know if you can see that. But I want to do I'm literally waiting for like one wire. Actually, like two. I'm trying to figure out how to get phone calls onto this show, and I have two audio interfaces here. I got my Focusrite, and then I got this guy, and I got a Bluetooth thing that connects in here, and it'll let me take calls. So I've made like a text now number that I'm gonna put on the screen, and people can text it, and they can also call in. So you don't have to worry about showing your face, but you can call in, and if you guys have child support issues, you can just call in and talk to me about it completely anonymously. You know, you can be like, my name is Tim from Nebraska, and we can all hear people's story. I would love to have a stream where people just share their stories. I think that would be great. And I'm not giving legal advice because I can't give legal advice, but I would definitely share my opinion on those stories. You know what I'm saying? From the context of someone who worked at a child support agency before. The other way I can get phone calls is through this Focusrite, but it doesn't have a dedicated thing through it. So I got some special wires that I can connect to my phone, and I'm going to see if I can get it to work on there. But either way, it's something I want to do. Like a Dave Ramsey show call it. Exactly. That's exactly what I want it to be like. And yeah, so people can call in and you know, it would be fun and stuff like that. So that's my hope. That's my hope. But literally, I have two wires coming in from Amazon today. I have one that's like specifically for the cell phone and another one that's for this. But I don't know. It's been such a pain in the ass. I don't know why connecting a phone to this thing is so hard. And I'm not even fully out of the woods yet on this. But if I can get it to work, I don't want to use Discord. I don't want to use Zoom. I love old school radio call-in shows, and I want it to be like that, you know. But I also need to start streaming more. I'll be honest, streaming can get a little tough. Streaming is tough, especially in the beginning when there's nobody watching you. But when someone comes in here and they say hello, it makes it so much easier for me. And I just decided to do a stream today because I was like, I need to start doing a stream with something. And the one thing I'll show you what I wanted to stream today. I wanted to just stream myself reading and studying, but I didn't. And I have this problem because like I need to be reading a lot about child support and welfare policy because I might go on Pearl's show again to discuss the laws. And I have a lot of it in my mind, but I really want to be like prepared so I'm not on there spreading misinformation. Like if her show, it will be an amplifier to stuff I'm saying. I want to go in there and say stuff that is verified and true and not wrong, you know. And hey, I'm a flawed human. Some of the stuff is going to be wrong, but I got to sit down and read a lot of things, you know. So I've been sitting here reading and it's hard to do that. So I told myself I'm just going to stream while I'm studying, but then I didn't do it today because I'm like, man, I don't know. I just feel like it might be boring. Like I would chat while I'm studying, but at the same time, I owe the viewer at least some form of entertainment. So yeah, I feel like seeing this on my screen and then me kind of quietly reading it, maybe talking about it might not be the most, you know, entertaining thing out there. So that's another issue. I'm trying to think of other ideas also for streaming. I was thinking about doing a stream where I react to the Pearl Michael Knowles debate. There was also Rollo on Timcast, or he was on Tenet Media, which is Tim Pool, which I might also react to. I could react to my own appearances. So we'll see what I end up doing, but ideally, I don't know. I would love to do the call-in show where I just talk for a little bit, but you know, if I have enough viewers where someone's willing to call in, then it would be cool. But you know, that's going to take probably a little bit of time to get people to want to do. So yeah, I do have a little bit of time. Though panel shows are a great way to grow. Yeah, I you know, Pearl's last show that I called into was definitely like a panel show. There was this other guy named Glenn Lawrence on there. You should check out his channel. He's pretty Christian oriented, but he's like a red pillar guy also. He's not like all the way tradcon. And you know, I'm not Christian, but I do like listening to his show. And it's interesting. But he messaged, or he sent me a comment on my last video. So him and I might do something soon, and I could imagine that it might involve some kind of panel show, possibly. Man, part of me doesn't want to end the stream. I want to react to something else, but I'm trying to see what would be a good thing to react to that isn't the Pearl debate that was 2.5 hours long. I've been subscribed to Glenn for some time now. Love seeing you both on the panel. Oh, awesome. Okay, yeah, so you know he is. Oh, that's great. Did you see? Okay, that's cool. I didn't know. I'm glad that you watched that. That's pretty awesome. Attribution, reuse allowed. Oh, there was another Elliot Hulse video I wanted to listen to, and it was something about NoFap.
Modern.
I actually used to read a lot of the NoFap forums for a long time, and I won't lie, it's a lifestyle that I live by. I don't like to watch, the prawn videos and stuff like that, and it's not part of my life. You know what I mean? Now that doesn't mean I'm this noble person. I do pursue women, so it's not like I'm a role model or anything. But I always read the forums, so I saw when I was looking for this video that he had a video about NoFap. So let's watch that. Let's just watch that.
Semen retention.
Oh man, he's going into it. He started off with semen retention, which is the most extreme of the NoFappers. Crap, I gotta. MTR's videos are excellent. You know what? Let's check that out. Let's not get into this. Maybe we'll save that one. Let me see, MTR. The real. Oh my God. He's losing it. Destiny reveals new information about his divorce. Candace Owens schools Ben Shapiro and Daily Wire during RP debate. That might be interesting. Let's see what we got on here. If you see something you like, I'll react to it. Toxic woman takes her baby father to court and instantly regrets it. Woman ruins relationship with BF for working 9 to 5. Oh, is this Caleb Hammer? Man, I saw this recently. This is crazy. That is insane. I don't know if you remember the story about the Tennessee officer that was sleeping with 10 women. Or not 10 women, but with a bunch of officers on the force. And she was in an open marriage or something like that, I think. I might be wrong about that, but she was doing it willingly, and she just got paid $500,000, so that was wild. Where's that video about? This was a month ago.
Then the person who...
Let's see what this is. This sounds pretty interesting, actually. I'll give him a like. I pretty much like any video I see, unless it's bad. I'll hit a like right away unless they say something I don't like. But
who
I'm pretty
self-perceives
liberal
as the
with
victim
likes.
is very likely to then strike out at the person who they perceive as the victimizer. And so for a lot of the red pill men who perceive the woman, the great woman, as the victimizer, the idea is that you lash out at women by having lots of sex with random girls and basically treating them like trash.
See, I don't know if I can. Oh yeah, it's complicated. I do a lot of reactions to him also. Man, he just said so many things that are wrong. Red pill teaches men to lash out against women. That's not true at all. Red pill teaches men to protect themselves, but it's not some hate group. And Coach Greg Adams did a thing about this, but the red pill stops a lot of men from actually being violent towards women because it gives men an outlet to deal with what the red pill calls their blue pill rage. You know what I mean? A lot of the worst things that happen, domestic violence wise especially, is from men who are blue pilled and they snap one day because they realize how badly they got screwed. The red pill was always a place to where hey, you got screwed. Learn about male-female dynamics now so you don't get screwed again. And just understand what you did wrong that led to her doing this. Therefore, you can understand that and internalize it and love women for what they are. That's what red pill at least used to be back in 2013, 2014. But what Ben Shapiro is saying is a complete mischaracterization. I hope MTR calls that out.
And it's okay because they said that it's okay with them, but I've never understood the argument that it relieves you of responsibility for treating a woman well just because the woman has consented to be treated badly.
So
maybe he's talking about like some Andrew Tate style stuff.
Folks over at the Daily Wire recently sat down for a group conversation amongst the anchors in the network where the topic of conversation of red pill continued to come up. So I wanted to be able to go through this content and as well as provide my own commentary to the things that they are saying. So without further ado.
No, I want to talk about marriage. Like, this is the big,
Oh,
I think one of the great
here's
conversations
Jeremy Boring.
we ever had on this panel was about marriage. One of the ones that I got the most positive feedback about from people who felt like it really edified them. But there's a real move on parts of the right to oppose marriage now. It's run by the ostensible red pill crowd, which, it's interesting how the meaning of red pill has evolved over the last 5 years to essentially now mean I would say anti-woman. They would say pro-man, but I think it's far beyond.
This is them trying to characterize red pill as specifically anti-woman, because the conservatives do not want red pill growing steam within their own house, and the more men that subscribe to it, it's going to be bad news for them because they're going to have to make some adjustments. This goes into my voting video from yesterday. And, they have to adjust to be able to deal with this. But he called it parts of the right.
Pro-man, I think.
And it's just like, if he can call it anti-woman, if he can get red pill labeled as anti-woman, then they can just ban everything. Big conservative and big liberal would love to work together to get rid of red pill on this one.
It's decidedly anti-woman in many ways. And
it also, men aren't lashing out at women by sleeping with tons of them. If that's the case, I hope women lash out at me with reckless abandon. Yeah, exactly. It's just him trying to paint it as degeneracy.
See people who, I think some of them are bad actors who are peddling, but then you also see people like Pearly Things who, I don't know Pearl, I don't know if she's a bad actor or not. I kind of get the sense that maybe she's just a naive person being kind of dragged along out of half desire to be famous and half probably hasn't read a book. And half of that I can relate to.
It's really her full desire to be famous. See, what part of my argument is that people like Pearl, because of their large subscriber base, are thought of as leaders of a movement. But if you see the things that she's saying completely undermines the work of so many men that push pro-male ideas, and instead she transitions a lot of her dumbass talking points into being anti-woman. So I find it so interesting that he says that it seems like most red pillars would say that it's pro-male, but yet he views it as anti-woman. Well, guess what? You view it as anti-woman because of people who have bastardized red pill, such as Pearl, because they mostly care about their own clout. But notice how he's giving.
See, this goes into this discussion about what red pill used to be back when it was on the forums versus the more recent manosphere popularization from shows like Fresh and Fit, Pearl, even whatever podcast. And it's not even really, it's about the format that they used and their skyrocketing popularity. And Kevin Samuels, you can say, maybe brought a lot of this about, but like Fresh and Fit were the first to do these panel shows where you have shows specifically where it's about the guys talking to the OnlyFans girls, or the both extremes of the sides talking to each other. And someone like Jeremy Boring just sees Pearl and Fresh and Fit and even Andrew Tate and gets mad at those guys. But the way I look at it is that what like Fresh and Fit, Pearl, and whatever, and Andrew Tate represent is the collective conscience, the collective male consciousness taking the red pill and then going through their collective anger phase. If you remember the red pill forums from back in the day, there was a well-known concept called the anger phase. And men on those forums would guide each other through the anger phase, so they didn't do anything stupid. But it's like once you took the red pill and the blue pill conditioning suddenly snapped, and you realize what happened, you'd go through an anger phase. And then as you internalize the red pill, you would come out of the anger phase because now you understand male-female intersexual dynamics. What happened recently as shows like, Pearl and Fresh and Fit and these folks, they got big suddenly because they started this specific format everybody liked watching it, not just red pillars. Red pillars and all men liked watching this show, and it's so popular, even other people, even women watched this show. But what they did was kind of unknowingly give the red pill to a bunch of people who didn't know what it was, and they all went through their anger phase. And this idea of having a show where you see a bunch of guys basically expressing their anger at women, it just kind of took over collectively. So then at this point, you know, Jeremy Boring only sees this collective anger phase, but doesn't actually understand how the red pill started, where it came from, and what it was. And someone like MTR is just like, we've been out here talking about this guiding men for years in a positive, constructive way, and it's been completely hijacked, you know? So, Mr. Pitt. Oh, we got, man, I missed a lot of chats. I'm sorry. Collabs are good for the algos, Paul Bros, Sidemen, etc. I've been subscribed again. Do you know James Sexton? Yeah, I've seen his videos. I did do a video where James Sexton was on someone's podcast and they had like a very little bit amount of views. So I asked him a question about no-fault divorce, and he actually answered my question, and then I made a video about his response, which I thought was pretty cool, because I really like James Sexton's ideas and opinions of things, and it's nice to hear someone who's actually a family law attorney discuss like his casework and what he's learned from it. So yeah, I do know him. He's great. MTR's videos are excellent. It's complicated. Oh, okay, good. That was it. Sorry, I thought okay, yeah. So let's get back to it. My bad. I got to do a better job of figuring out where I put my chat on this thing. I have like 3 things because I'm streaming to Twitter at the same time. So I have Restream open, and it collates both of those. Like it puts the YouTube with the Twitter chats together. But I feel like sometimes that doesn't work as good. So whatever. All right, we'll get back to the show. Man, another thing I want to do is bring sound effects. I do have some sound effects. Hold on a second. Let me see if it'll work. Real quick. I'm sorry. I have to do this. I have to do this out of my obsession. Sound effects, new default. All right, let's see if it works. Oh, shit. It may not even be plugged in. Nah, no luck. Oh, shit. Oops. One more time. If it doesn't work, I'm just going to give up. Oh, there it is. See? I got them all. We'll see if we can have some fun with that. I can't even remember all the placements of them, but... That's my fart sound effect. All right. Enough of that. Back to this. All right.
Giving Pearl a pass, and that's simply because she's a woman, even though she's the main arbiter of the bullshit. One of the main arbiters.
But the other half, you can
see
also...
that? He said one of the main arbiters. I wonder who the other two... Well, see, I'm saying two, but who the other arbiters would be in his opinion. I would be interested to know.
Really? But I do think it's this interesting question that is harder to talk about in one-on-one.
It's so crazy to think, like, just a few, like, months ago, here's Candace Owens, and now Candace Owens is gone. Like, she got the Game of Thrones treatment. It's over for whatever. I guess she got in an argument with Ben Shapiro, or it has to do with Israel, and she had this rabbi on, and there was this, oh yeah, I remember now because I saw it on Twitter. There's this guy named Rabbi Shmuley, and I think he was threatening to sue the Daily Wire over some stuff Candace Owens said. And I remember seeing his tweet about threatening to sue, and it's just like a couple weeks later, she's fired, ostensibly, or they parted ways. And that might be the reason. But, you know, it's part of the game, man. It's Game of Thrones over here. Yeah.
But I do think it's this interesting question that is harder to talk about in one-on-one settings. It might be befit this format. Just to talk about what is the role of men and women, what is the role of marriage in a society that has essentially turned its back on the concept of marriage, that is legally encoded anti-man.
His premise, his question is already wrong. It's not a society that's turned its back on marriage. It's a society that's turned its back on men, very specifically. The problems with marriage are downstream of turning their back on men. And that's what he needs to understand, is that he needs to be fighting to make things fair, at least for men at this point.
Okay.
Policies
and then
into our
abolish
legal
the
code.
definition of marriage. I mean,
Abolish the definition.
It's not anti-men. They've abolished difference. They've abolished the difference between men.
The distinction itself.
Yeah.
You know, I just went on the Whatever podcast for my, I think it's now my like 28th hour on that show.
That was 6 hours.
After a 3-hour debate on the show. So I did.
That was a separate thing?
Yeah, I did 9
So you
hours.
did 9
basically
hours?
straight. Yeah.
Whoa.
But it was worth it.
How?
It was
Why?
great. It was great. I really love that show. I love it because
Got almost every question.
when
There's another thing that's weird that is going on here is I don't know why. It just seems like these guys have gotten invites from Fresh and Fit to be on the Fresh and Fit show, but they never go. They only always ever go to the Whatever podcast, and somehow Brian from Whatever just has like this great relationship with the TradCon Daily Wire specifically, because there's a lot of folks that have been on that show specifically, but Whatever podcast is just as much responsible for spreading a lot of these points as anything. You did have Candace Owens come on Fresh and Fit like last week, but she's fired now, so maybe she knew this was coming.
when I did it the first time.
You pay me $1 million, I wouldn't.
No, I love it because these poor girls, man. The whole thing with that show, which is why it's so funny, is you get.
Hold on, I'll pay you $10,000.
You're really going to do it.
You're like 11. No, the thing with that show that makes it very funny is guys go on and they make fun of these girls who have OnlyFans who are like 18 and don't know anything. And then the guys completely destroy them. And then the girls look like dummies. And then the clip goes viral. And
Poor girls who just have an OnlyFans and don't know anything. Stop treating adult women as if they're just girls who just don't know any better, when they're making an active decision to be a digital strumpet. This is a large component why Red Pill exists, because you have men in society that will give passes to women in lieu of the bad decisions that they make. Since when did we refer to adult men as poor boys that don't know any better? Lose a limb or come back in a casket? Are they poor boys then? Or were they just fighting for their country?
I felt...
Well, it's crazy. I mean, I think people know, like, if you're an OnlyFans chick, if you go on the show that they're going to be grilling you. I mean, the show's been around long enough to know that that's what the show is doing. So, but they still go on the show, so they want to go on the show. I mean, that's all I'm saying,
It would be wrong to do that. I felt I might get a lot of views, but I might also burn in hell for eternity. And I thought about it for a moment, and then I thought, no, okay, I won't do it. And so I went on, and
You also have a rule: never give the audience what they want.
Yeah, exactly. Never, I went on a great
Michael knows
discourse
story.
about the Treaty of Augsburg, actually. So I go on there, and I just felt it's not these girls' fault. All of them have some weird family situation. None of them. We live in a culture that teaches them a ton of lies. They have no education, even if they.
Does that mean it's not the men's fault because there's so many men out here being raised in broken homes? Like, are we free from accountability too? Oh my God.
Went to good schools. They have no education. They don't. So I felt, okay, let's just talk about what's really going on here. And they're victims of feminism, and the Red Pill guys are victims of feminism. And the
Okay, there
irony
we
about the
go.
Red Pill guys, I sympathize with them a lot of ways. The family courts are totally stacked against dudes. The culture
Okay.
promotes divorce, and
See, at least he will admit that the family courts, aren't biased.
abolish the definition of marriage and blah blah blah. But the Red Pill guys are feminists. Their sense of men and women is basically
That's
this.
right.
It's just that men and women are interchangeable.
Yes.
And go around, screw around, you owe nothing to women. If it's good for women, it's good for men. And that's just a lie. The fundamental.
See, the way he characterizes it just isn't. It's essentially women have stepped out of their traditional role, and men are left here holding the bag. And the only way to not get screwed, unfortunately, if you're dealing with women that have stepped outside of the traditional role, is that you have to operate outside of the traditional role. But they want to call Red Pillers feminists in a way to try to shame them. But to me, it's a mischaracterization, because to me, it's a reaction to what feminism has led to,
unit of society.
Oh yeah, they do have a superiority complex, Trevor. I mean, well, these guys are living in their ivory tower of morals and values, and they just don't know what it's like for normal people anymore. I mean, you know what I mean? Like when he goes to the grocery store, I don't think he has to see us, if you know what I'm saying.
He is actually not the individual.
Right.
I love individual rights. It's good to be an individual. The fundamental unit of society is the family. It's men and women together who have a love that becomes so real that you make more people.
Well, to have
There's components of his arguments that I actually...
Man, look at this freaking feast they're having there. Okay, they got popcorn, some grapes. Bet you not one of them touched a single thing on this table and just got up and left after.
Agree with. Yeah, again, it's not these girls' fault that they chose OnlyFans, right? There's no way that they could have just chosen an hourly job with less wage but with more dignity, right? Let's not blame them. Let's blame feminism. Now, regarding his comments regarding RP is like feminism, here's the thing. I used to completely disagree with this statement, but I can see in looking at how different content creators utilize their platforms, I can understand what he's saying. There's a lot of modern day feminists that make a lot of sweeping dumbass generalizations about men, as well as there being a lot of RP content creators that make sweeping dumbass generalizations about women. Ergo, 16-year-olds are more attractive than 26-year-olds or whatever that dummy said. But there's a lot more balanced versions of RP. For example, I consider myself RP adjacent. And within my definition, I say that understanding RP means that you understand a woman's nature. But not just that, you also understand male nature as well. Why you're on a quest to build the happiest or the most joyous, purpose-filled life possible. There's many men that understand my definition of RP but still want families. However, just as you said, they're looking at state-sponsored marriage as not the solution within their lives in understanding this nature. Marriage is a traditional concept, but now we have modern appetite or modern behavior conjoined. And in modern times, when you join the two, it seems like men are getting the shit end of the stick, which you admit. So many men are making rational decisions with how they utilize tools such as marriage within the purpose-driven fulfillment within their life.
have an ad.
See, it's just like, I mean, men have to make this rational decision because women have stepped outside of their traditional bounds. So if you're going to be a traditional guy and the woman is allowed to not be traditional, you will shoot yourself in the foot over and over and over and over again. And, you know, these guys over here, you know, they're not going to blame the OnlyFans girl. They're going to be like, oh, well, they had all these circumstantial reasons why they ended up here. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made these decisions if they were in that situation. They can't put accountability on the women because legally they can't do anything about it. So they have to put all the accountability on men because men are still controlled and are still whipped by a lot of these laws where the women aren't.
You have to have a proton and an electron, right? So it's like a man is a proton, like very important, but essentially nothing until it's
To
unified.
have Adam, you need to have an Eve.
No, you don't.
That's where I thought he was going.
That's where I thought he was
And
going.
then I thought he was going to go for the Steve thing.
These men are simps.
That's why
Not Steve.
I've always
This is blue. I mean, you know, yeah, they're simps because this is Blue Pill headquarters right here. I mean, Blue Pill wasn't always just like an atheist guy who hangs out with feminist women because he's hoping he's going to get laid and then agrees with everything they say. I mean, Blue Pill is also tradcon conditioning, the Disney fairy tale save the princess conditioning that is separate from what a liberal simp looks like. Like this is the conservative simp central right here.
What do you mean, essentially nothing? Have you missed out on all the Kevin Samuels broadcasts where he would lay out the importance to men to this world? A world that would run fine without women, except for the continuation of our race. That would eradicate us all, obviously. But that would happen over time. If you removed all men from the world right now, calamity. The world would turn to absolute shit in 3 days. There's too many men that support the infrastructure of this world to be taken lightly.
2 protons an atom does not make. I dare say.
I've always with the red pill, you know, and I've been in many altercations with.
Come on, Matt.
the red-
I'm rooting
I've
for
run
you.
afoul of the red pill crowd many times, talking about these issues.
I'm rooting for you, Matt.
And the question I've always had for them that they've never answered, and I'd love to hear an answer from any of them, is that, you know, because I agree with 95% of their criticisms.
Okay.
As you point out, the family courts and it's how it's stacked against men and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Yet these guys have not done anything to help that situation. It's the worst part about them. It's just like, yeah, we agree that the family courts are messed up, but then they do nothing. Like, they've not mentioned anything about trying to change this. Like, we talk about marriage all the time. Like, what? But you're not talking about divorce or custody or this or that. But then when it comes to this, Matt's like, yeah, I agree with 95% of it. But it's just that it doesn't square with me. Like, wow, how come you haven't been doing anything? Tradcons are clinging to an antiquated view of intergender dynamics. They're as blue-pilled as it gets. Yes, exactly. They're still operating off of I bought Myron's book, but I guess what he'd call the old contract, you know what I mean? Versus the new social contract, which I guess is still being worked on. What used to be attainable to the middle class is now reserved for the upper class. Work-life balance, housing, stable marriage. That's a huge problem, man. And that's a good thing to point out, because it's just like economically, kind of what this goes into, Trevor, is women being able to work, right? And listen, I operate off of the genie's out of the bottle, and I'm not trying to take away no rights from nobody. But with women working, you have men. Women are working and competing in the same job market as men, effectively taking, let's just say, half the jobs, right? And what that does is it keeps wages stagnant, but then they also expect men to be traditional providers. How are men supposed to be traditional providers if they're making less because they're competing in the same job market with women? Those two things, that just cannot work. And then if people can't stay together, I mean, house prices are going to be a lot higher, because now people get divorced. Now you need two houses, for the man, one for the man, one for the woman. People can't live together. The cost of everything is up. But, except for these guys, these guys are living in like some gentrified type of world. You know what I mean? Where the rest of us, there's like them and then there's us. You know what I mean? It's why I brought up the Charles Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities. Do I have that? It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. No, that's James Joyce. Damn it. It's not within grabbing distance. Oh, well. But yeah, the economics have everything to do with it. It reminds me of Officer Tatum was on whatever podcast, and he was going back and forth with Brian about, getting married and the benefits of it. And Officer Tatum was like, even if you're poor, I mean, you could still keep your wife at home. You can still keep your wife at home. She doesn't need to be working. And then as he says that, and immediately after, he's like, you can get a second job. You can get another income. And it's like, yeah, because if you're going to be on the middle to bottom rungs of society, you need two incomes to survive. So just because you can keep your woman at home, you still need two incomes worth of money.
The other option, like, okay, we agree with all that. Mm-hmm. So then men should just be alone and give up on their bloodline and die, and their bloodline is extinguished. Like, what? Oh
my God, your bloodline's extinguished, and then your legacy and all these things. It's weird when he makes appeals to that, because first of all, you don't need marriage if you're just concerned about your bloodline. I knew some guys at the child support, that had child support cases that were extremely prolific, and it had nothing to do with marriage. I mean, you can be out here making deposits, if you know what I'm saying.
You are suggesting is despair. You are telling men are already feeling despair. They're feeling meaninglessness. They're feeling lost. They're feeling alone. They're feeling like everything's stacked against them. And so your answer to them is, yeah, well, just that.
No, they're not feeling everything is stacked against them. Everything is stacked against them.
That's be in despair and then die. And my point is
that's not what the red pill says, but
that's just not an okay answer. That can't be the answer.
And have lots and lots of sex.
Well, but that's the
sterile.
That's
sex.
what you said.
Although not as much as a married man.
Right, exactly.
But this is what you were saying, is that's how it turns to the anti-woman. Yeah. Because it's not about the despair. The way that you find meaning is then by disparaging the people who have victimized you, right? In any victim-victimizer sort of narrative, when there is no actual victim and victimizer, and it has to be sort of put together artificially.
I hope he's not saying there's not a real victim here.
And the person who self-perceives as the victim is very likely to then strike out at the person who they perceive as the victimizer. And so for a lot of the red pill men who perceive the woman, the great woman, as the victimizer, the idea is that you lash out at women by having lots of sex with random girls and basically treating them like trash. And it's okay because they said that it's okay with them, but that doesn't, I've never understood the argument that it relieves you of responsibility for treating a woman well just because the woman has consented to be treated badly.
But he's right about.
To answer Matt's question, really, what I view the red pill is trying to do is to inform men of what is the marriage contract. Because there's a lot of men that are signing their name on a dotted line without really understanding what it is that they're putting up on the line. Just as was said earlier, men are also the victims of feminism as well. And throughout that, we've seen these Disney concocted fairy tales of living happily ever after. But we understand through the numbers how many marriages end off in divorce. So really the RP is saying, men, inform yourself before you make this decision, because these are the things that are happening within our modern society today. Now, there's some RP content creators that say never get married. There's other RP content creators that say just don't get married via the state. There's other content creators that say
yeah, I mean, yeah, avoid the state contract.
Well, if you get married, ensure you get an ironclad prenup signed by 2 different lawyers, a lawyer for yourself and a lawyer for her, essentially arming these men with tools, because information is a tool to reduce the risk, to mitigate the risk within their lives, because society has shown time and time again that they don't care about men. Now, responding to Ben's point about the victimizer,
that's what it's really about. It's about mitigating risk, you know, and what the TradCon folks will say was that, well, everything has risk in life. You know, you're not a man if you're not going to take on risk. And but the truth is that marriage and family and the risk that came with that was a lot different than the risk that comes today. So at a certain point, taking on a certain amount of risk starts to look like foolishness when the risk is so high that it's just crazy.
I get the main idea of his point. It actually makes a lot of sense. But I'd also argue that the creators in the space that have great intention regarding the content that they feed to these young men continue to preach never being a victim. Yes, we go over viral content of modern women doing stupid shit or parroting illogical or irrational pro-feminist talking points. But instead of becoming a victim to all of that, you just point and you laugh at it. And you look at the knowledge and you upgrade your toolkit of understanding what is happening around you so you can make better decisions for yourself.
But the despair.
I understand what MTR is saying about not being the victim or not letting victimhood define your decisions and wallowing in a pit of despairs. But I would also say men are victims. I mean, there are victims of paternity fraud. That person's a victim. You know, there's victims of parental alienation. That person is also a victim. Now, you know, there's the self-improvement spiel about not letting that define you and improving yourself and try to fix some of these problems and try not to make the same mistake again. But make no mistake, I mean, there are victims out here, and yes, some of those victims are men, and I know that's a little contrary to how we view masculinity, as men can't ever be the victim, but I'm sorry, men are the victims sometimes. Let's see, Trevor says, here in Australia, if you simply live together for over 2 years, de facto relationship. Yep. The other can have claims to any income capital gains one makes over those 2 years. Wow. Okay. Got it. So it's just for those 2 years. Is that a country? Is that nationwide? That's really interesting. Yeah. Cohabitation is the other big thing there. And here too. I mean, of course there's common law marriages, but common law marriages aren't as widespread here as they used to be. So, unless you're very specifically in a common law state, but for most of us, we're not. So no, simply not getting married saves you from having your assets split in some cases. Yeah, that's true. Like typically, like in California, so we're a community property state, and it's like if you get married, property that you have, especially within the marriage, is community property. That's split 50-50. If you're not married, then, you know, your property is yours, her property is hers. But what you're going to be on the hook for is like child support and these kinds of things, you know. Now, you can have a live-in girlfriend. The live-in girlfriend can file a domestic violence charge against you. You can get kicked out of your own house, and she can continue to live there while you are then ordered to continue paying the bills. Stuff like that can happen. It is your house, but, you know, so long as this case is going on.
This is permeating the right. It permeates the politics of the right. It's the idea is basically it's all over. They think of people basically, Ben, like you and me, as sitting on an ice floe, kind of floating out as the ice, melts away.
Yes, exactly.
Because we're sitting around thinking about civil debate and, constitutional governance, and they think that's all over now. And their despair permeates the right. And I listen to a lot of these young guys, and they're talking about bringing back monarchy. They're talking about, they're king. I know you look.
What? I didn't say anything.
I don't know if Red Pill advocated for bringing back monarchy, but
Anything.
But we had monarchy. It's not that great. It actually isn't. If you think our elections are bad, wait till you see the beheadings. Because that's how most of the kings of England were killed.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
that's fine.
if you've ever read Plato, he goes through the different styles of governance in his republic, and the highest one is an aristocracy. And then it goes to, I think it's called the timocracy, which is honor-based. But the aristocracy starts out with philosopher kings. And then it goes to timocracy, which is more honor-based. And then oligarchy, I believe, which is like the money rules, you know what I mean? And oligarchs rule, rich people. And then, even worse than an oligarchy, he says, is a democracy, which is where we're at now. And once the final worst kind of governance, which is just right next to democracy on that wheel, is tyranny, basically. So, a monarchy can work, but a monarchy to me only works in a society of a people that share one identity. If you live in a society where there's many different identities, then probably democracy is the better way to go about that.
I'm not saying we need an imam or a sheikh, or like a sultan. I'm just,
Wait, am I missing this? What is the red pill no marriage thing? I feel like I'm pretty in the...
Oh, yeah. No,
Come on,
Am I missing? I feel like I've totally missed this.
Yeah, that's their whole position. They think that marriage
That's
is
their whole position.
What men are anti-marriage?
Right, yeah.
Oh, I'm glad she asked specifics about
That's
that.
the point. They shouldn't be. But it's...
No, but yeah, he's right. This is true.
all the guys that pop up in our Twitter feed.
But tell me, I'm actually missing this.
The men that pop up in our Twitter feed. Come on, bro. Twitter is a cesspool of negativity, or the most controversial takes will surface to the top. Utilizing creators such as Pearl as a de facto for RP is like utilizing the Westboro Baptist Church as a de facto for Christianity. You can do better than that.
I didn't know the marriage thing. I'm very pro-marriage.
Pearl made that argument.
Yes.
She made the argument men should not get married.
Okay.
Because the institution.
But are men listening to that? Like, are men saying that men shouldn't get married, or is that a woman saying that a man shouldn't get married?
Well, I think that there are examples of men saying it as well, but I think Pearl is sort of one of the prominent voices. A lot of the people.
But she's not married.
No.
Yeah.
Anyone I could think of who's saying don't get married, well, specifically with the state, I guess would be James Sexton, because he says it's an old technology, specifically the state contract. He's not against people pairing up, I don't think so. So I'm kind of surprised they didn't mention that. But it's like, even these guys are trying to get views too, and it's like Pearl has a big platform. So if they mention Pearl, then, maybe it's all about engagement. I'm sure these guys saw James Sexton's work and everything like that. It's just, I think they purposely try not to name people because they don't want to have to elevate them or end up in a debate with them.
Okay, so then that I think that's a huge thing, right? I mean, obviously, it's like listening to people that don't have kids tell you why they shouldn't have kids. Like, it doesn't really work, right? Because when you're telling them about what changes inside of you when you get married, and I think it's very easy to gravitate towards that. That is a feminist message, not to get married. And if her argument is, if your quarrel is with the courts, I could agree with you. The courts have done tons of things that are awful that I disagree. I don't even agree necessarily with the courts taking marriage at all. It was a church thing, and they took it, and this is how we ended up with gay marriage rights, which I'm very much opposed to.
Go, Candace!
A big part of the red pill thing that we would all probably agree with is they diagnose actual problems.
Right.
So when Pearl or other people in the movement come along and say, this is a major problem in society,
Right.
I almost always agree with them.
Yeah.
It's when they get to the prescription that I think that it falls apart. The prescription
gets
being,
dumb.
lashing out at women generally, or embracing despair, or kind of nihilism.
It's a feminist message. I mean, that is fundamentally to be.
It's funny because he says he doesn't like the prescription, but then the only prescription that he offers is to continue to get married with the state contract. So, put out a better prescription.
Anti-family. I don't understand how you could identify as a conservative at all, because everything that the left is trying to do, every Marxist principle, every feminist principle is about disrupting the family unit. It's what connects everything from the climate change lobby to don't have kids, the planet's going to die, to feminism, be like men, we should be like men. It's all a disruption of the family unit. And if you are now arguing in favor of something that's fundamentally Marxist, then you have to examine whether or not you're conservative at all. That would be my pushback on that.
What we're trying to
I haven't heard any men say that they're anti-plot. Maybe I need to just...
No, I have. A lot of,
I don't want to give them press because they're all jerks to me online.
Okay.
Shout out to Candace.
I kind of wonder, Candace is like, I think around my age, like early 30s, I think. I can't even remember. Maybe she's younger than me. But I wonder how her age compares to the rest of these guys sitting here, because she looks like she's the youngest one in the room too, and there might be a real generational difference.
Who's ironically the only woman on this panel right here, for actually sympathizing with the alternative and holding some of these men and their soft-ass talking points accountable.
But there are a handful of these guys, and the irony of it is they put themselves out there to be these big, virile, pinnacles of masculinity. But their anthropology is fundamentally, for lack of a better word, gay. Right? Their anthropology is fundamentally sterile, and it's saying, yeah, we shouldn't get married, we shouldn't have kids, we should just have sterile relations with random women. And so it's kind of how the irony that we end up at the topic that no one's allowed to name anymore that Matt made a movie about, and people say, well, that's so crazy, we should dial that back. But that's just a consequence of the very same sexual revolution that has said for many decades now that men and women are exactly the same, which comes from feminism, right? So
horseshoe theory.
Totally, yeah. I mean, it's the logical conclusion of Gloria Steinem is these red pill bros, and they don't even realize it.
I just had a flash. Can you guys just picture if there was another chair sitting up at this table? You know who I wish was at that chair? R.I.P. to the GOAT, Kevin Samuels. He would have fit in perfectly within this conversation to give an alternate perspective. Although I don't personally...
That is true. I'm sure he would have. On an unrelated note, I hate how much I like cigars. And I'm glad cigars are expensive, because I'd probably be smoking them more often. Trevor says, when women are better at advocating for the red pill than tradcons, what has the world come to? Listen, I mean, if the message is good, I don't care who says it, frankly. And, it's like Pearl's been pretty accurate lately with a lot of stuff, I get it. Like, okay, yeah, Michael Knowles is a better debater, but some of the stuff she said in the debate was really important. And I understand why MTR is mad, because for the past few years and like the peak of that sort of, OnlyFans bashing content, it wasn't helpful for a lot of red pill aims, and it gave people an idea of what the red pill is not, but it did make it mainstream. And Pearl has shifted her message and is taking on the tradcons, which no one's really been doing to this level before. I mean, red pillars have talked about tradcons. If you look at the old subreddit and stuff, there's been conversations about tradcons. There's a thread from a guy named Whisper that I want to bring up. After we react to this, I'm going to see if I can find that thread, and we will watch that. Yeah, R.I.P. to Kevin Samuels. I have his old tap sound effect, and I don't want to play it because it sounds disrespectful. But when he did like, rest in peace.
Feel as though I am on Kevin's level yet. I'm younger. I still got some years to go. Maybe eventually I'll get there one day. But it's something I always admire about Kevin, his ability to handle these different conversations in such a mature and responsible way.
Kevin Samuels had the look to fit in with these guys. I mean, he had that like suit wearing, the way he can talk. He doesn't cuss, the French toast stuff and all that. And it would fit in with these guys, like in a way to where he's older, he has that presence, he has the experience, he can discuss that to them. And I can see a lot of these guys deferring to what he has to say. Mr. Pitt says, my only issue with Pearl is that she's terrible in debates. She can't hold her own. She needs to be able to tag in someone like CGA. Yeah, I've only seen like one CGA debate, and it was him reacting to his debate where I guess he got ambushed. I love CGA. Coach Greg Adams is my favorite YouTube content creator. I love his morning show, and like, I don't know, that man just knows how to be entertaining. And I agree with what you say. Like, yeah, they're not the best debaters. with Pearl, it's like, I have no trouble giving her any of the information I know about child support because I want to help her in those debates. And I know like some of the other Red Pill creators are not happy that it's her at the debate table with them, but I do wish they would still lend their knowledge to her to help her be better prepared for these debates, because if she does well, if she mentions some of these talking points on a large platform, people will hear them, and it should only lead to more debates. Now, that being said, it is obvious that a lot of these guys don't want to debate any of the other folks, maybe because they're afraid they might not do as well. I mean, it's easier, if they kind of prop up Pearl as the big boogeyman here, but we'll see what happens. I saw on Pearl's Twitter, she took a picture with Candace Owens, so I think we might be getting some content of her having a discussion with Candace, which is going to be a post-Daily Wire Candace discussion. So it'd be interesting to see what she says, what Candace says about Red Pill with Pearl.
When put up to the task, like when he wasn't just entertainment, Kevin, and he was, let me answer this question for you, Kevin. Brilliant. But I do think that this gentleman right here is missing a major component of the argument. Women obviously want to be married, but the question that you need to ask is, are these women, modern women today, of marriageable material? And of the ones that are of marriageable material, would they be willing to marry the average man? Feminism has
See, those two questions are excellent. And in the Michael Knowles debate with Pearl, he very specifically he brought up how there's parity in the population. Like there's just about as much women as there are men. But just because there's population parity, it's like when you start to segment that down, how many of those women are feminists? How many of those men in the population are in jail and never getting out again? How many of the men in the population are actually, homosexual and don't even want to marry a woman? You know what I mean? And it's like, what are the incomes for most of these men? And then for the women, how many of them are feminists? How many of them have been, having sex outside of marriage this whole time? And what does an actual pairing look like? And if Michael Knowles expects all the men to be with all the women, then there has to be some differences in how a man carries himself if he's going to have to parlay with these women who aren't traditional.
Condition the modern woman today to expect and want it all, as if they're living in this Disney Barbie Wonderland fairy tale. Tell me.
Exactly. Mr. Pitt says everyone on this panel would lose to RP creators like Myron Gaines and Rollo Tomasi. Yeah, I mean, Rollo definitely is the guy that should be in there discussing a lot of this stuff. I mean, I have his book. I gotta, and he's one of the original guys. I mean, they know who he is, but for some reason they won't debate him. I hope they debate him. And I don't know if it's because his platform's not as big as Pearl's, but Myron has pretty much an equally big platform as Pearl. So it's like they could be debating Myron Gaines too. And I mean, if they're pissed off about what the prescriptions are about men telling other men what to do and it's contrary to marriage, Myron's written a book. So what they can do is they can read Myron's book and then get pissed off at Myron and say, hey man, on page 82, I think this book is actually up. Actually, page 82 is where the resources start. It's just a shorter book. But on page 80, 78, here it is, the strategy, page 78, over to page 80, 81, where the book ends. And they can be like, this is what you're telling men to do as the strategy. And then you can have an interesting debate that way, but they refuse to.
How does that support marriage? How does that support relationships? The modern westernized culture doesn't support marriage. Our laws don't support it. Society doesn't support it, but they do support use a man.
And these tradcons completely enable that, because what they do is they refuse to acknowledge the true problems, or at least, okay, they'll acknowledge the courts, they'll acknowledge the women, but then they'll be like, oh, women were just tricked by feminism, it's not their fault. And they'll just continue whipping the guy and not doing anything that changes any of the societal conditions for men to marry in this traditional way that they want it to be. It's just hot air at this point.
They do support the business of marriage. Don't think marriage is a business? Go ask your local divorce attorney about that.
I'm radically pro-marriage.
What I run into a lot, I mean, whether these people identify as red pill or not doesn't really matter, but when I talk about marriage on my show, and I promote it, and I talk about my own experiences with marriage, I hear all the time. I mean, the comments are full of people who are conservative who are saying, "Well, that's just your experience. That's a you got lucky. You have it easy."
Yes.
And so you're trying to trick men into this deal that isn't going to work for them just because you happen to find a good woman, and that's the kind of defeatist mentality I hear it all the time, all the time. And what I want to say to these men is like it's an easy way to dismiss it, but we're all married in this room, we're all happily married. So we didn't get lucky. It's like you have to work at it every single day. It's a choice that you make, and there's a lot of women out there who are looking to make that choice also. So it's very easy to just kind of dismiss.
To get back to
You know, I think a lot of these guys just haven't truly been heartbroken like once in their lives, like not even from an ex-girlfriend or something like that. And there'll be a day, like God forbid, but if that ever happens, that's when they understand it. And then they're just like, oh God, I get it now. Because they could never imagine it happening to them before.
Drew's point, actually. So I'm going to back your point before you back your own. So the real question is why that's arising on the right. You understand why that revolutionary movement exists on the left. I mean, Kant has spelled it out. It is fundamentally a Marxist movement that seeks to destroy the institution of marriage in order to level all of society so that you can build up, based on the ashes, some sort of weird scrap heap of new creation. But the question is why that's happened on the right. And this is where I agree with Drew, is that because the right, and this goes back even to some of the Taylor Swift points that you were making earlier about why the right is getting Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce wrong, just imagistically. Yep. I mean, I now agree with everything you said about Taylor Swift, but the reason that that's happening is because since every institution has now been fundamentally taken over by the left, or at least that's the belief of the right. If you extend that to every institution, that extends even to like the most important institutions, right? The right is looking and they're saying every institution that we once relied upon wrested out of our control, including things like church, right? Things that were very fundamental to our lives, wrested out of our control and then militarized against us. And so that's sort of the argument that the red pillars are making. What they're saying is that the institution of marriage was wrested out of our control and then perverted and used against us. In the same way that they're arguing that about the government, or arguing that about the church, or arguing that about the universities or the press. And the problem is that when it comes to marriage, because it's so personal and because in the end, there is no substitute for it, you can't just despair of the institutions and say build a giant alternative in the way any.
See, and if he believes that, then it's like, why aren't they advocating for people to just get covenant marriage and not state marriage? They can't separate state marriage from covenant marriage. And I can hear it if they're like, hey, listen, to Trevor's point, it's like cohabitation is enough to get you in trouble. But whatever, it's less painful if there's no state contract. But for some reason, it's like, why don't you, they talk about marriage all the time. They should just advocate it to be like, hey, if you guys really are living righteously and religiously, then get the covenant marriage through the church. Don't get the state marriage. But overall, the reason red pill guys are saying this is because they're reacting to what feminism has been allowed to do. We got Dan the Man in here. Shout out to Dan the Man. Tested out my sound effects. Dan the Man says, during the debate between Pearl and Michael, he outright said women should never be held accountable for their bad decisions in life, which is crazy to me. Yeah, I know. I mean, and that was amongst him saying other things like a man should never divorce even if his wife cheats on him and has a baby that's not his biologically. Like, Michael said all that in there, which is, how long can you support these guys for?
Like, you have to.
And then, then they call the red pillars liberal and feminist. It's like they're just trying to drive away some of their voter base. It's not going to work. They're trying to shame people. And people say shame works, but my opinion on shame is that shame only works if you have laws that actually create consequences for the people you're shaming. So if stealing is bad, and then, you can shame someone and they'll stop insofar as they'll get in trouble for stealing. But when it comes to, let's say, the OnlyFans girls or the feminists or whoever cheating, having sex outside of marriage, you can shame them all you want. But I mean, a lot of the times I think they just dig their heels into it and just do it even more because now they know it triggers them. So they're like, let's do this even more. Like, let's take it to the man. And there's no legal consequences for them. There's no legal consequences if there's paternity fraud. Nothing's going to happen to the woman. Like, nothing happens criminally. So yeah, you can shame them all you want. It's just going to push people away.
Actually do the thing that conservatives really should be doing in nearly all of these all of these modes, which is seize control of the institutions back. So the big debate that's happening right now on the right is, can we do that with these institutions, or do you burn them to the ground? And it differs institution by institution, right? I think most of us in this room would say
They have completely failed so far to take any institutions back.
like the university system, go ahead and burn it to the ground. Or,
Okay.
or the legacy media, go ahead and burn it to the ground. But when it comes to the institution of marriage, you can't burn it down. That's not something you can burn down.
Well, it's not an institution.
Let me try to answer your original question, Ben. Why is it popping up so much on the right? And I think the answer is really simple. I would argue that it's more prevalent for men on the right to utilize facts, data, and statistics within their argument. I think when you begin to start to look at the numbers, 50% divorce rate, 70% initiated by women, you have logic-driven men making much more rational-based decisions. And let's not also include the anecdotal experiences of men in and around your space and circle. I would also argue that men on the left make a lot more feelings-based decisions, which allows them to be covered in rose-colored glasses for a lot longer period of time.
Invented by man, for one thing.
Right, exactly. And so you actually have
Well, you can burn it, but you burn civilization with it.
Exactly. And so I think that what's happened is a broad category error that the right has made. In being anti-institutionalist broadly, you're starting to see the most right-wing edges of the right wing say, well, that includes all institutions. And that's why you see the link between, hey, there's bad divorce law, maybe we just shouldn't get married or not participate in the institution of marriage. It's fundamentally broken and it's dead. The thing that the right, I think, needs to get back on board with is, no, many of these institutions, even if they seem like they're not savable, are so important that there is no ready alternative to them. And so you actually have to seize back.
And marriage.
Yeah, there's no ready alternative to them, but I kind of see it as a boycott. Boycott it until there's some institutional, governmental changes from the inside out that don't put men in such a precarious position.
Exactly, a boycott. Men have to just the only thing that's working, the only reason these guys are talking about it is because men are holding the line somewhat. If men listen to them and stop holding the line, these guys are going to immediately just stop giving a damn and go back to whatever other stuff they talk about that has nothing to do with helping anything. So men holding the line is the only thing that's getting this any kind of attention to hopefully get worked on in the first place.
For an ill-advised decision that they made on a woman when they were 20-something years old. My sneaking suspicion is, and maybe I'll do a poll on my channel to get some more data to back this up, is that most men that identify as RP would not have a problem with marriage if there was not a such thing as divorce. If there was not a multi-billion-dollar industry of lawyers and judges that are designed to extract as much resources out of them, turning them into a math equation, irrespective of the blood, sweat, and tears that they put into a relationship because she feels as though she wants something better. Feminism pushes unhappy women to divorce their husbands. This wave of RP is simply a response.
Exactly. See, he said it very well there. It's a response. Men did not want this. Men have been given no choice but to operate in this way, especially once they get screwed over by the system. This is a reaction to feminism. If the princess no longer wants to be saved by the prince anymore, the prince has to figure out what to do with his life and figure out how he's going to operate, and that's what the RP is trying to do. The RP is trying to figure out, well, here's what the problem is. And, for the most part, men make their own decisions, but men talk and compare notes too. And it's like, ultimately our instincts will lead us there to what works and what doesn't work. That's what's going to happen. But he's right. It's a response.
Specifically are based on individuals. What individuals do, that's what the institution will be. And the thing is, when you live online, you live.
Another thing about feminism convincing women to leave their husbands, that I don't think anybody marries a blue-haired feminist or whatever and then is upset when they get divorced. But men are upset when they marry someone who presents as traditional, but then 7 years in says they're a strong and independent woman, which is feminism rearing its head. And that's what we call a lot of undercover feminists. See what I mean? So that's when men feel like they've been screwed over because they thought they were taking a traditional deal, but that woman has the legal option to change her mind and exit her traditional role at any time. And whenever she does that, there is a cost to the man. And the men are finally saying, hey, every time I'm traditional, most of the time, I end up getting screwed pretty badly here. So they're like, all right, well, what do we do now? The unfortunate thing is stepping out of traditionalism necessarily means stepping outside of what people's religions tell them to do. And that's the hard part that conservatives can't seem to deal with in that way. And ultimately what causes this problem is the secular laws. So, you know, these tradcons will say you need to get married and go to church more and read the Bible. I'm like, yeah, of course that's going to help. But if these religious marriages didn't have constant acid being thrown at their bonds from corrupt secular laws and spaces, then the religious marriage would have a better chance of working. So the secular laws need to, if they would make divorce better and less incentivized for women, it would keep more marriages together. Because if the woman knows, I can't find this guy, and in a praying mantis kind of way, take his resources and leave him, they're going to be less likely to target people in a predatory fashion, and maybe people who are better suited to get married would get married. Trevor says, hi, Shah. What is your definition of red pill, manosphere, MGTOW, and how do you differentiate the three? That's a good question. That's a great question, actually. Let me think about that. So red pill, I tend to go with Rollo's explanation because he's so vocal about it. He'll always go behind the the red pill is a praxeology thing, meaning it's more so just like data sets that discuss intersexual dynamics between men and women. So they're just looking at it from this basically scientifically driven point of view. And it's not here to tell people how to live their lives. It's just the handbook for how men and women operate on this level of intersexual dynamics. He uses the phrase Chilton manuals. It's how you take the car apart and put the car together. That's essentially red pill. And from what I remember in the early days, like I only remember red pill from the subreddit. So I'll be honest about that. I wasn't on any of the other forums. I just remember the subreddit from like 2012 or 2013-ish onward. And it was right when I graduated from college in 2012. I started reading the red pill because I found it somehow. And it really was just guys kind of comparing notes, talking about pickup, talking about field reports. You'd have high-level theory in there. You know, it was things about like, don't get stuck in one-itis, have abundance mentality, alpha, beta, what works for attraction, what doesn't work for attraction. That's essentially what the red pill was. And then guys would learn, okay, this is what it is. This is how men and women operate on that level. And then they would start applying it to their life to get laid, or even if they're in a relationship, like it'd be like, hey, I did this when I got laid at a club, or it's like, hey, my girlfriend's been acting like this to me, so I decided to, I don't know, dread game, or this is how I passed the shit test, or whatever the hell it was, and it's improved our relationship. So they were just taking stuff and applying it to their own lives. The manosphere, if I had to define that very specifically, is manosphere is like an umbrella term for a lot of these like different YouTube podcasts and channels and even forums on the internet, which is where men are going to either be entertained and discuss societal changes like feminism or relationships and male and female dynamics. But the manosphere includes everything from just red pill talking points to people talking about relationships. It can include grifters. I don't want to call people grifters, but it can include the Andrew Tates, you know, of the world that are selling Hustlers University. It can include, you know, or even Pearl's shows, part of the manosphere. Guys like the Fresh and Fit would be part of the manosphere. Whatever podcast you can say is to, whether they're selling something or not. You know what I mean? Rich Cooper, Better Bachelor, all these people that are loosely connected based off of the things they're talking about, and some of these points can be considered the manosphere. MGTOW is very specific. That's men going their own way, and that's guys who, a lot of those guys kind of went through divorce and then they kind of just check out. You know, they're like, all right, they're the guys that kind of just say no to relationships or any long-term investment into a woman ever again. So I think it was a lot of divorced guys, but then it kind of became like, if someone's going MGTOW, they're going their own way. They're not going to think about relationships anymore. And they just focus on whatever happiness they can find in their own lives, but they'll never want to get married again for the most part. And how do you differentiate the three? Yeah, that's pretty much it, man. I mean, if I had to differentiate them, but yeah, Red Pill's supposed to be the Chilton Manual. Manosphere is where anybody can get behind a mic and say whatever the hell they want to say and give life, even advice to people about how they should live versus just, hey, here's the intersexual dynamic inner workings of it. And MGTOW are guys, men that kind of get together and share their experiences, but they have a prescription of actually going MGTOW, Steven Crowder is a case example of an undercover feminist. Yeah, I mean, you can say that. His wife, ex-wife now, would be an undercover feminist. And Steven Crowder ostensibly did everything the traditional way. I think they were each other's first partners in that sense. And they were both of the same religion and things. And, then that ring footage came out or whatever. The ring footage is one thing, but the ring footage just shows that there was already problems bubbling up there. The divorce was probably going to happen prior to even the events of the ring footage. But yeah, that's exactly what happened to him. He probably can't talk too much about it because maybe his divorce is ongoing, but I would love to see how he's changed from then versus now, because he's the classic example. And I mean, it can happen to any one of these guys right here. The red pill was an interesting take. Thanks for the origin for that one. Yeah, I want to show you a thread from Whisper, who was one of the original guys who used to comment on or make posts on the original Red Pill subreddit. And he did a good thread on marriage that he talked about it that I'm going to find. Please remind me. I hope I don't cut the stream without forgetting. I do have to leave probably in about half hour or so. Damn it, they're still part of this MTR video. But there's a really good interview with Whisper, and it's from a YouTube channel called Red Pill University. And they interview Whisper, and he talks about how the subreddit was created. And one of the things he mentions is that, so guys used to go to this subreddit called r/seduction, and that's where they would be like, okay, how do I, there was some conversations about how to, get women. You could almost say kind of like pickup conversations, but seduction is for like everything. It's more of a mainstream subreddit. Relationship, whether it's in your marriage or relationships, whatever. And what he said is that the way that the mods handled r/seduction was that anytime anybody ever got into a conversation, or not even a conversation, but if you're going to point something out about intersexual dynamics that was kind of past where the mainstream morality was a little bit, the mods would come in and stop that. So you couldn't really have more frank discussions, so to speak. So a lot of those guys who kept getting banned from there, eventually they made the Red Pill. And the Red Pill, when it created its structure and the way that the mod team was going to be, was that they were going to allow people to discuss things about intersexual dynamics that might have been uncomfortable, but what they would not allow is people to then apply morality to it. Because anytime we were about to find something out about intersexual dynamics on r/seduction, the mods would come in and be like, that's immoral, we don't like this, you can't talk about this here. But with the Red Pill, it was like, you can talk about all this stuff, but do not talk about your morality. Like if somebody started to come in with their morality, that's the stuff that would get you into trouble. It was just like, hey, just focus on the intersexual dynamics and don't sell us your way of life, basically. So we'll look at a thread from him before this is done.
Living in this fantasy world of loud voices and angry voices, and it's very easy to be overwhelmed by it. It's very easy to think, I think this probably has happened to all of us, where people are screaming at you online, and you suddenly think everybody's angry at me. And it's 6 guys with like a couple of bots that are just coming after you. True. And they're the loudest thing, and they're surrounding your head.
I don't want to get bot business.
Because you're stuck in this make-believe world of the internet. And the thing is, you build institutions by doing things with the people in your community and with the people that in
real life.
Yeah,
we're incarnate beings in time and space.
Yeah.
I get your point that it's make-believe, but it is in fact a microcosm of some of the real issues that people are dealing with. I get it, there could be a negativity bias, especially when there's bots attacking your ass, but these are real issues that are happening to real people that are passionate about what is going on around them. I know I'm passionate about it because of the amount of men in my life that called me at 1 o'clock in the morning crying their eyes out because their once happy family is ending. And they feel completely helpless, weeping at the thought that he may lose access to his children. Meanwhile, the state is on her side.
meat robots.
This is important.
That was the problem too. I mean, and back then, if you're a guy and this happened, there was nowhere for you to go talk about this, because if your marriage failed, it's like you were the bad guy. You know, guys can't talk about the abuse that they receive without losing your manhood, damn near. You know what I'm saying? So it's like these forums became a place where all these people who kind of got kicked out of, you know, circles that look like this, that are these like perfect religious people, and like once you mess up somehow it's your fault, you know, they ended up over there on the forums and comparing notes and these kinds of things. Trevor says, Steven Crowder reminds me of an NPC who turns into an Agent Smith from The Matrix after he becomes a glitch to the system. Yeah, I don't watch the show enough anymore to know. I don't know if he's talked about this stuff recently. I would love to hear what he has to say. I would love to see him have a discussion with like Pearl or Fresh and Fit. Like, I wish Steven Crowder would go on the Fresh and Fit show or something, you know, like not whatever podcast where all the tradcons go. I would like to see him go to either, you know, Fresh and Fit, or even have a discussion with Pearl. Like, that would be more interesting to me.
Marriage in particular is a thing that you do, right? Marriage. How do we fix? We need to fix divorce laws. Like, I think that we should start a nonprofit think tank. All of us.
Yes, absolutely.
Should pitch in. I know what you all get paid.
See, and like the thing about, okay, let's start a think tank. Yeah, great. Let's please start the think tank. But the fact that like they haven't cared about this, it's, you know, 2024 now, and it's just like, now you're talking about the think tank. Finally, it's like breached your guys' consciousness that this was a problem. Better late than never, I guess.
I start a think tank just aimed at addressing the horrible inequalities that exist in family law right now. There's no question that in particular.
Steven Crowder did? Oh, wow. That's great. I'll have to watch that. I actually, you know, maybe that would be a great live stream reaction. Thanks for that. I'll look for that.
Particular women are incentivized to leave their husbands.
If
right?
you got rid of
So
correct divorce, you would solve 72% of these problems.
I'm with you, by the way.
But their husbands.
If
right?
you got rid of
correct
divorce, you would solve 72% of these problems.
See, I don't think he's even right about that. Yeah, it might bring it down a little bit, because an at-fault divorce is harder to pass by, but 72% seems a little bit high, because what he's not, and James Sexton understands this, or even if you look at my video where I asked James Sexton a question, he brings it up a little bit, but people were finding ways around at-fault divorce. You know, like when people really wanted to get divorced, what they would do is just fabricate evidence for the court, and the parties would collude together. I mean, you know, because it's like scholarly papers have written about this, and that's one of the reasons they went to no-fault divorce, was because someone would pretend like they were cheating, and then, oh my God, there was a photo of them, and that would get submitted to the court, and then they'd just run the divorce through. And then a lot of at-fault states would create different laws where it's like, okay, if you guys are separated for a year and not living in the same household, we'll process the divorce. So a lot of states made it to where like it's easier to get an at-fault divorce here than it is in some other states. And you'd see couples come to, they would call it state shopping, come to like California or wherever, wait for the limited time to become a resident, and then just get their divorce through. So it's like, you get rid of no fault, I don't know if it'll bring the divorce rate down. It'll add a few extra steps. I mean, bring at-fault back, whatever. It's better than nothing.
With you, by the way.
But I don't disagree with you, but that's an all or nothing proposition.
I'm
only saying that we're not a year from getting away from moving away from no-fault divorce. That's a generational activity, just like getting rid of just like introducing no-fault divorce was a generational undertaking. There are a lot of goalposts between here and there, places where we could make an immediate difference in the lives of a lot of men. You know, you could actually go tackle this problem. It shouldn't be.
And nobody has been tackling it so far. These guys have not been.
The case that a wife is economically incentivized to leave her husband, and a husband is not economically incentivized to leave his wife. In very broadly speaking, that's a bad incentive structure. We might be able to do something about it. But
they should also do something about paternity fraud and parental alienation. But they don't care, because it's like, to them, if someone gets divorced, like if you get divorced, like to these guys, you're subhuman. You know what I mean? You're not you're out of the club if you get divorced. It doesn't matter what happened. The fact that you get divorced, they don't even want to associate with you. You're anathema, you know? And because you're subhuman, they don't care about your problems after that point.
Ultimately, whether you fix that bad incentive structure or don't fix that bad incentive structure, whether we get rid of no-fault divorce or don't get rid of no-fault divorce, your marriage is not a statistic. Your marriage is the actual marriage that you, the actual person, is in with another actual person.
Completely agree with him on his take on no-fault divorces. But I do think that his focus is on the end of a fracture. But this bone has multiple fractures within the value stream. Focusing on the end is, it needs to be done, but what's being done up front? And up front, you have the incentivization of 304 culture, fake girl bosses. I don't need no man. OnlyFans, body count doesn't matter. Live out my roaring 20s. All men are dogs. I don't need no man. What I'm trying to say.
And there's no way to curtail that legally without necessarily infringing on these citizens' rights to do what they have rights to do. And not to mention that the job market's completely different. If you have both men and women in the job market, that changes the whole provider role expectation. If men are expected to protect and provide, I can understand men still being responsible for the protecting part, but the providing part needs to get split down the middle.
Is that this is a multi-pronged issue. That's why it's so important for content creators like myself to point a finger at this bad behavior to begin to alter some of the mindsets and ideologies that we all feel is normal within our culture. I mean, shit, we still have content of public interviews where modern day women are still complaining about wage gaps. Because of the patriarchy, why does the WNBA not get paid as much as the NBA? Meanwhile, the NBA is subsidizing the entire WNBA because they can't get your ass in them seats.
And you have enormous agency there. And the worst thing that's happening on the right, in my opinion right now, is this victimizer mentality is settling in. And I completely understand why it's settling in. It's settling in particular because the left was so effective at using it to build their winning coalition in the mid 2000s. It's not exactly how they elected Barack Obama in 2008, but it is how they reelected him in 2012. Is with this hierarchical victim mentality.
Coalition of
the stuff he's talking about is way too recent. Like most of the changes that happened were in the 70s, so to speak, and then in the mid 90s again. Like child support, the federal child support program was in 1975, and then they made it very powerful in 1996, and that had wide bipartisan support, both Democrats and Republicans. It was a popular thing. He's talking about 2012 and Obama. I mean, he might be talking about a cultural shift a little bit, but the legal shift had already been done by then.
Tendon, right? Or something.
That's right.
They called it. Yeah.
And so then you end up with the right seeing that's what works, and recognizing the only group of people to whom it doesn't apply is conservative or white Christian male, like the people who traditionally have voted Republican in the country. And so they basically took that same victim mentality and tried to make it work over here to build a coalition. And the problem with it is if everyone is a victim, right? Once you reach every human as a victim, then we are all basically nihilists. Like there's nothing left anymore.
There's almost, I agree with you, Jeremy. There is a point though where the right, we want to deny oppression generally because that's the language of the Marxists. Mm-hmm. But I almost think we should acknowledge it for a second and say, you know what, there is oppression, there is victimization.
Oh my God, he's almost there. He's almost there. Yes, there are victims of paternity fraud. There are victims of parental alienation and exorbitant child support orders and alimony orders that don't make sense.
It happens to all of us. It's not the result of the white guys or men or the women or whatever. It's sin, actually, is what oppresses you, and it leads you to form vices. And when you form those vices, you become a slave to your appetites, and you have a crappy life in a crappy country. And so you're right. Let's acknowledge.
But it's not sin. I mean, was it Steven Crowder's? Was it because of sin? You know what I mean? It's just like there's guys who do it right and then get screwed over, and they technically didn't participate in any sin. I mean, they got married. They did this, and no, it wasn't sin that was a vice. It was the laws that screwed him over. Dan the Man says, I saw your reaction to Doug Wilson. Oh, thanks for watching that. It reminds me of a story in my church. In a nutshell, both are religious, She initiated the divorce, lost the house, and can barely see his 11 kids. That's a perfect example of what I was talking about. It's like what sin did that guy do to end up in this situation? You know, and it's just like, Michael, I got a feeling is going down like, if you do everything to avoid sin and vice, and I've read all these ancient these theological writings, and I'm a smart guy, but it won't happen to you. But it's just like, no, there's plenty of guys that avoided sin and vices and these things and that end up in that situation. It reminds me, it's a woman I've been seeing recently, and her brother is like super Catholic, you know what I mean? And he married a woman from the church. They got 3 kids, and she just left. She took the kids, she's gone. And the woman I'm hanging out with, she's just like, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And she's telling me that her brother all the time drives past the house to try to see the kids, but he can't see the kids, and she won't let him see the kids. And he just sits out there in his like pickup truck just hoping to see these kids, but he can't, you know what I mean? And she just up and moved away and went to whoever's house. And yeah, I mean, it's like, that's not fair to that guy. Now he's dealing with the child support system, effectively 0 custody. If you walk into the child support office, at least where I used to be at, and they're not going to care about what the formal custody is. What we would do is we'd listen to what the parents tell us. And if he said, yeah, I have a custody order, but she's not letting me see my kids, I haven't seen my kids, I would hear that and say, okay, this guy has 0% custody for when I do my calculation. Even though legally he should have more custody than that. But because he told me effectively it was 0, I'd have to put 0 on that guideline calculation. Oh, man. Unfortunately, that's what it was.
Acknowledge that, and then recognize that you do have it. It's easier when you have a society that impels you toward a better life and more human flourishing.
Okay.
But you actually do have some agency, and the law, the Constitution, is only going to be as good as the people who enforce it. Did you see this ruling came out of the Hawaiian?
Before he gets into the ruling, I agree with him. The issue is that people will just dwell within their victim mindset because it's difficult to ascend for these people. It's difficult to be accountable for your actions. It's difficult to look at yourself in the mirror and want more, to execute on your goals. Way more easy to be a victim. Oh, and by the way, you get more clicks on social media for it.
It is true that one of the big red pill voices.
That's true to some extent, but that's not the one size fits all solution for the problem that we have.
Is out there. I won't name you.
I wish, and I know this is counter to traditional masculinity, but I wish men could be seen more as victims, because or at least men could understand themselves as victim, because men delete themselves after losing their family and because they're a victim of all these court things. But because they can't see themselves as victims, they consider themselves as failures for why these unjust things happen. And that's how they get into a place where they decide to push the red button and fling themselves out into space. You know what I mean? From the ship. But it's almost like, I tell myself, if a friend of mine comes to me and he got divorced tomorrow, the first thing I'd be like is like, man, you did amazing. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, it's okay. It's okay. You did the best you can. I mean, you didn't, you know what I mean? It's just like that the system made it this way, but I still give you credit for doing as best as you can. I need you to understand that. But it's just so sad because when people's kids are in the mix and they can't see their kids.
Either he is somewhat well known. And I saw him railing about how these Daily Wire guys all talk about marriage, and not one of them will actually sit down and talk to a man who's been hurt by the injustices in our family law. And
he's talking about Better Bachelor. I'm pretty sure he's talking about Better Bachelor here.
My wife left me and destroyed my life and took half of my money and more than half of my money. And he goes on this long rant, and then he gets to the end. And I kid you not, and he gets to, and yeah, I lived on the road, and I made a bunch of mistakes, but I, blah, 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 blah. And I thought, oh, you're blaming the institution of marriage for multiple affairs, not a mistake that you made, a lifestyle that you embrace.
The problem with that is okay, yeah, so a guy does something bad, a guy cheats, and then he gets screwed through divorce court, and everybody's like, well, that's what you get. But that doesn't work, because on the other side of that, it's like the guy can be the provider, not cheat. The woman can cheat, and she still gets everything from the court. So there's a problem that's greater than that.
An anti-marriage lifestyle. You were living outside of your the vows of your marriage, and you're upset that your wife decided to formalize that. And we could say that maybe in a no-fault divorce situation, she would still have a claim. There might even be societies in which she wouldn't have had a claim. None of that's actually the thing being debated. The thing is, you can't be unhappy that your marriage doesn't work if you didn't work on your marriage.
This is actually one of the reasons why I step away from this term of red pill, because if you cannot control the brand of something and it is not affixed to your image, then you need to wipe your hands clean of it, because whether you like it or not, or whether you said that specific point, you were tied in with someone else who said that point. Sort of like if everybody in your friends group is a scammer, you will more than likely be associated with scammer. Even if you're a good person, don't scam people, and if your heart's in the right place.
This person obviously didn't. And this brings me to the last thing I want to say, which is that you never know out in the wide world and all the craziness who's actually a good guy and who's a bad guy. I mean, sometimes you know who's a bad guy. It's often hard to know who's a good guy.
Okay.
Would anybody sit down and talk to Pearl?
I invited her on the show.
I feel sad that I actually missed this. I don't know how. I feel like I'm on the internet, but I missed this trend, and I would definitely sit down with her because that makes me sad that a woman not aspiring to marriage, your life gets so much better. I talk about marriage the entire time on my podcast because I want women to know that, and it's not a message that's often reflected in culture. If you look at just this integration of shows, we've talked about this on past backstages, but I grew up watching the Winslows and all that great Nick at Night TV, the Jeffersons, and it was all about family togetherness. And now what's being projected on the screens is that men cheating on men, love and hip hop style, Real Housewives, everyone's crying and hysterical. And the truth is that if you don't have that man and woman coming together in this institution, what you end up with is hyper femininity and hyper masculinity, and neither one of those things is good, actually, because what happens?
Another way to say hyper masculinity and hyper femininity is narcissism, right? That's all that is, right? Like hyper feminism encourages narcissism in women, right? And sadly, the only answer to hyper femininity is hyper masculinity, and that's represented from guys like Andrew Tate. And the unfortunate thing now is because of our laws, it's literally making the citizens here select for narcissists. See what I mean? Because it's like you almost have to be a narcissist to be able to survive in the toxicity, and it's just creating more and more and more and more narcissists. Dan the Man says, this is what happened in the case of my church. The guy did everything right and still lost everything. Yeah, and then that's not right. And it's like, and it's not the church's fault that the secular state became this monstrosity that intrudes into the lives of the middle class and the normal common people. One of the things I do want to do, maybe a stream, maybe I'll just make a long video. I want to stream myself studying because there's a lot of stuff I have to read and get through, but there's this concept of private family law and public family law. So going all the way back a long time ago, even like English law, there is always one set of laws for people, private citizens who are married and are not a burden to the state. And then there's a second set of laws that used to be called the poor laws. Now, we call it welfare and stuff like that. But these specific laws only apply to people who didn't have it together and they required help from the state in order to live. And therefore, that gave the state the right to intrude into their lives and say, well, if you're going to do this, then you have to do this, this, and this. And over time, there was always these two divided sets of laws, one private and one for the poor, one public. They would call that a public law, a public family law. So private family law and public family law. And what happened is in the mid 70s, we had the federal child support system come into play. And the child support system was created only for the purpose of getting welfare money back, because a lot of kids were being born out of wedlock and a lot of single moms were living on welfare. So they made child support to get money from the deadbeat dads to pay for these kids, okay? But what happened was when in 75, child support used to only really work with children and women that were in the welfare system. But in 1984, I believe, that changed and they started advertising their services to families that weren't on welfare, okay? And this started creating a whole problem. But really, since the federal system was created, is it created a joining of private and public family law that really is responsible for a lot of the problems that we see in family law today. So if you're trying to do it the right way, there's unfortunately not just a private family law that just applies to you, because now the woman can always appeal to the public family law in order to screw your marriage over. That's a conversation for another day. Bad guys are held accountable by society and by the law. Yeah, and unfortunately, yeah, that's true. No one holds the women accountable, unfortunately.
When you come together is you have the perfect masculine and the perfect feminine. I would agree to those men that feel impacted and hurt by what's happening. I very much agree with, I actually believe that we're living in a matriarchy. And that's why it's hell on earth right now, because women are in charge, even though we're saying we're not.
See, that would fit with the red pill gynocentric social order that they talk about.
And they're
not even mothers.
They're likely responding to the matriarchy. I'm radically anti-feminist. You're anti-feminist. I'm radically anti-feminist. I'm like willing to forego voting to let men do it, because when women,
well, there's a similarity between her and Pearl. There.
We just are too emotional. Men are hyper. Yeah, I'm there. Like, I would do it easily if the vote was up tomorrow. But because hyper femininity yields to really bad things, women's emotions get hijacked very easily.
Yes.
Men's aggression can get hijacked when you get the hyper aggression.
Very
when
true.
You come together, you weed out those hyper elements.
See right there about women's emotions being hijacked and men's aggression being hijacked. This kind of, I've been thinking about this lately, but this goes into trafficking, right? Women are often trafficked from pimps because they hold them emotionally hostage, and they end up doing these things. Boys are trafficked all the time, and boys are trafficked into things like gangs, militias, to fight and die for things that really aren't even their problem or should concern them. So both people get trafficked and hijacked, but yeah, their aggression is used against them in that way.
And so I am a marriage stan, as the kids are saying. I've learned this slang. Stan is a new slang.
Have you ever noticed?
Candace has said the least in this conversation, but I think she said the most impactful words within this conversation. I've gone over my channel time and time again of Candace Owens dunking on these modern day thoughts, and I absolutely love it when she does it. I low-key view Candace Owens as a female, more political version of Kevin Samuels, who didn't necessarily talk to these modern women one-on-one, but the way that she can consolidate truth bombs in such a short amount of time and make it entertaining, I see glimmers of Kevin in that. All right, though, folks, I've been here waiting.
Well, and now we have Candace parting ways with the Daily Wire, so maybe we'll see some really interesting stuff coming from her in the near future. I do want to see if I can find this thread I was talking about. This might be a problem. God, I don't know. It's just like an old thread. Yes, I know Red Pill is quarantined. All right. Come on, let's see it. It's from Whisper. Damn it, it's not there. I don't think I'll find it, man. It's too old. Okay, that's not gonna work. Oh no, it's just Reddit. So I just need to go to the old forums. Let me see. There's an archived version of the Red Pill. The Red Pill archive. Dear God. I don't think we're going to be able to find it. That's sad. Oh, wait, hold on. 1.0. Maybe this is it. Nah. Let me see. Let me play around with this more. Nope. Okay, you're now logged in. Great. Okay, this might work. All right. Red Pill. Yes, the search function's working now. Marriage. Wow, it's like I can't remember how to spell it. Marriage 1.0. Come on, please work. Ah, I think I found it. Excellent. Okay, here we go. This is gonna be kind of like what Red Pill used to look like. If you've ever read the old forum, this will just be like a little blast from the past. But this was from 8 years ago, from Whisper. So you see that? That's Whisper. He's the guy who did that interview I was saying that you guys should go listen to. But I'll just read some of this. And created October 2012. See, that's how long the Red Pill subreddit has been around for. But it, you know, for a long time it's been under quarantine, so nobody can actually join it, which is funny. But the Red Pill, discussion of sexual strategy in a culture increasingly lacking a positive identity for men. Okay. So who killed marriage 1.0? So he's going to talk about a difference between marriage 1.0 and marriage 2.0. Warning, this post is pure theory and contains no actionable advice other than don't get married, dumbass. Read only if you are curious. So you already know you need to avoid getting married in any modern Western society, no matter how good the woman is. And you know why? If you don't, you have some reading to do. But having established all that and knowing what to do and why, some questions still remain. Most importantly, how did we get this way? Who broke marriage? Oh, what? I got $5 from Trevor. I'm going to need to acknowledge that. Trevor, I'm still working on getting the chat bar onto the screen. I did download a widget for that, but let me just shout you out. Thanks for the 3-hour live stream. I only wished for you that more people watched. If you stream again, could you schedule it on YouTube in advance? I definitely will. I'll do that. I will make sure to do that next time. That's good advice, because then people can see when it's going to be. I did do this one kind of off the cuff. If I do stream, it'll be either on Saturdays or Sundays, but I will make sure to put a premiere next time. And the next time we do this, I hope to have the call-in function ready. So I want people to call in and talk about their stories, anonymously, of course. When you call in, I'm just going to say, like, hey, can you just give us a name, just like a first name? And you can fake your name if you want. A name and where you're calling from, and age if you want, but you don't have to. So then, you know, people get some idea, and then people, I think, would be more forthright with being able to talk about the specific details of the story if their name doesn't have to be on it. But I definitely will do that next time. Outlaw is in the building. What up, Shah? Hey, VO Warrior, voiceover warrior. Man, it's a pleasure to see you here. I appreciate you coming into the stream. I'll be streaming for like another half hour or so. But again, thanks for that donation there, Trevor. That means a lot to me. That's going to go to my cigar fund, by the way. So when I finally save enough YouTube bucks to get a cigar, we'll do that. All right. Most importantly, how did we get this way? Who broke marriage? It wasn't feminists. It was feminism. In fact, far from being the cause of destruction of marriage. Ooh, let's see if I can make that bigger. I'll do it like this. In fact, far from being the cause of the destruction of marriage-based society, feminism may very well be an effect of that collapse. So that's an interesting theory, right? After all, you don't think that after hundreds upon thousands of generations of women being women, we suddenly got blue-haired hippos with cat glasses spontaneously and for no reason at all, do you? Suddenly decided to start hating men. No, the fundamental change that broke marriage is something else. And when there is a sudden, sweeping, permanent, and global change in human society, there's only possible culprit, because only one human process runs in one direction only, never fails or falters, and spreads everywhere given time. Some of you are already nodding your heads. It's technology science. Good old clever monkey know-how. Why? There are several pieces. Western lifelong bilateral monogamous marriage 1.0, which is what we are focusing on here, is sexual communism. Both parties sacrifice their optimal strategy in return for a safety net and a stable society. Men must sacrifice their urge to mate with every available female who is a 5.1 or greater, but they are guaranteed to be allowed to mate with one woman who isn't much lower than them on the desirability scale. Women must sacrifice the chance to F Chad, be supported by Brad, and keep Thad in the dark about the whole business, but they get lifelong commitment guaranteed. Unlike economic communism, sexual communism is not inherently bad and unworkable. This is because the enterprise and initiative that economic communism sacrifices is a public good that flows to everyone. But the sexual success that sexual communism sacrifices is a private good which only benefits Chad and Stacy. Alpha F's Beta Bucks. However, like economic communism, sexual communism can only survive when it's the only game in town. Communism only works when everyone is a good communist. In any economic communist system, the majority of those who produce more value than they receive in an equal share will opt out if given the chance and keep that value for themselves. This slowly destroys the system unless the top is unable to escape. Doing big things, my man. Awesome to see the growth of the channel, brother. Appreciate that, man. Means a lot, man. And I know you've been here since the beginning, so it pleases me. It makes me very happy to see you still here with us, man. I hope you're doing well. In a sexually communist system, a similar dynamic will happen with Chad and Stacy. The highly competitive players will always tend to move the game that most rewards winning. Winners don't like low ceilings, and communism imposes a low ceiling in order to create a high floor. The Tradcons were right about, remember, this thread is from 8 years ago, right? And this is from the old Red Pill forum. And Tradcon isn't like a new word. Red Pillars and Tradcons have been, like, Red Pillars have acknowledged their split between the Tradcons years ago. This is not new. The Tradcons were right about destroying marriage. Marriage can only survive when it is enforced as an institution by society, right? Never as one of a list of options. Gay marriage destroys marriage. Promiscuity destroys marriage. Single motherhood destroys marriage. Fornication destroys marriage because everything that isn't marriage destroys marriage. But society did enforce marriage as an institution. It was held up as the sole outlet for sexual release. Anything else was frowned upon and ostracized when it wasn't outright punishable by law. Even if you did it, you had to hide it. But the world has moved on. We are all villains now. Why the second piece? Economics controls the age at which people become independent adults. Okay, so this is important, right? And you got to think, right? The age of marriage nowadays is like 30, 29, 30. Since the snake hat. Yeah, I know. I had to move that. It is up here out of reach, though. But yeah, people used to get married, in their early 20s, right? Sometimes even younger. I mean, I think if a lot of us think of our own parents were married way younger, right? And that's because the economics of the situation really allowed for that. Economics controls the age at which people become independent adults. There are several adulthoods that happen at different ages. The age of sexual maturity, the age of legal sexual consent, the age of legal adulthood, the age of economic independence, and the age of economic surplus, by which I mean the age at which one can afford a home and children. So see, this is a big problem for millennials. The first age, sexual maturity, is firmly fixed by biological processes we have no control over. It is 12 to 13. This is a whole nother conversation about how the age of puberty has gone down significantly. I need to find my charger for my... Oh, damn, where is it? Oh, here it is. My mouse is about to die. All right, here we go. All right. Yeah, this is a whole nother conversation. I mean, with microplastics and terrible diet and obesity, it's gone down to like 9 or 10. And if you go back to old records, like mid 1800s, this used to happen at like 15, 16. because they would record when women got their first menstrual cycles, and that was the marker for sexual maturity. Anyways, moving on. It is 12 to 13. It is when sexual desire emerges in a clear, unambiguous, and irrepressible way. The second two ages, legal consent and legal majority, are consciously set by people, either with laws or social mores where laws are absent. They are often set as a response to the other ages, consciously or unconsciously. They are less important for this discussion. The age of economic independence is the age at which the average working adult with typical skills and no rare talents can support themselves financially. See, this is the average person. A typical average working adult with typical skills and no rare talents can support themselves. The age of economic surplus is the age at which that same adult can afford to have a home and support dependents, not just themselves. The age of sexual maturity is when most people start wanting sex, but the age of economic surplus is when people can afford to get married. See, there's a difference here, okay? Now, I'm just going to spoil this for you. What we're going to find out is that the age of economic surplus has gotten older and older and older. For the average person to have economic surplus, to have dependents and thereby get married, has moved further and further and further away from the age of sexual maturity. So it used to be you got sexually mature and only a few years after that you can then get married. All right, that works if you're both going to be virgins. But now sexual maturity happens and the age of economic surplus is like early 30s, which means there is a lot of years in between sexual maturity and economic surplus. But let's go ahead and read more about that. Okay. And the third, technology produces information economies. An information and service economy requires longer to train for than an industrial economy, which requires longer than an agrarian economy. That would be like farmers, right? Which requires longer than hunting and gathering. The more sophisticated the skill set required for economic productivity, the longer the delay before a new adult can be economically productive. And this goes into economic surplus. Technology stretches the gap between sexual maturity and marriage. Dan the Man says, I also think the mentality also changed as well. Women don't want to run the race with their man. They just want to wait at the end of the finish line and marry the winner. Man, this reminds me of someone I dated, but I know exactly what you mean. They're trying to get the guy that's on the top of the mountain already, and that guy has every woman trying to get him. But the women don't want to join hands with you and walk up the mountain together with you. And, you know, that's kind of what used to happen when people got married young. So, yeah, you're right. The mentality did change because they're all trying to just jump the gun and jump up the economic ladder. Everyone is trying to class jump, which is just like, it's predatory. Okay. So here we are. Technology stretches the gap between sexual maturity and marriage. And the fourth and final piece. The sexual urge can only be delayed briefly, never denied. Once the average person hits sexual maturity, the clock is ticking. The further from that point in time you look, the greater percentage of them will have had sexual intercourse. So, right, like this is how you get, like, if you're 15, 16 and you're sexually mature, normally if you'd wait till 18 to 20 to get married, that's not that big of a deal. But now if it's like this happens and now you're waiting till 30 to get married, there's going to be some sex outside of marriage happening. And for the guys who aren't doing sex outside of marriage, they're masturbating. You know what I mean? I got TradCon friends that do that. And it's like they're not married, but it's like, well, you're still looking at these things, which you know is a sin anyways if you're going to, you know, live by that moral framework. If marriage can occur at 15, 16, most people can wait. This can happen when you live in a small farming village. Land is close to free, and your neighbors get together to help you build your house. If marriage occurs at 26 to 30, almost no one can wait. Virgin brides become a thing of the past. A thing becomes socially acceptable when a lot of people do it. If a lot of people are having sex outside marriage, then sex outside marriage becomes socially acceptable. Man, this is the red pill I miss. You know what I mean? Like, this is the kind of fun post that they used to have on there. Now, you know, all this stuff got subsumed into the YouTube podcast world. So now we put it together. Western lifelong bilaterally monogamous marriage 1.0 can only survive if non-marital sex is socially unacceptable. People can't afford to get married early in modern technological economy. If people can't get married early, non-marital sex will become socially acceptable because hormones don't give a shit about the real estate market. When this happens, marriage begins to crumble very, very slowly, but very, very inevitably as alternatives become more widespread. Conclusion: Marriage 1.0 was doomed by technological advancement long before feminism came along. The only thing feminism did to Marriage 1.0 was perform an unholy ritual to turn its corpse into Marriage 2.0, a vile zombie nightmare that shambles about looking like its former self, but only existing to devour those it once loved. The question of could marriage be truly resurrected will be left for a later article. So yeah, I think that kind of discusses the problem very, very well. And here's something interesting to look at too. You see links to manosphere, and you have all these old school websites that used to be considered the manosphere. Here's Rational Male, that's Rollo, Dalrock, Illimitable Man, Chateau Hartiste. Someone let my key. But yeah, so that's where we're at there. And the manosphere then got changed into what you see on like YouTube and Rumble nowadays, right? It used to be this stuff. But let's see some of the comments for this. Could marriage be resurrected? I have a different question in mind. Should it be resurrected? Remember that for all the public gnashing of teeth women do about Marriage 1.0 being unfair to them, it was also an injustice to men as well. Divorced males also face social ostracism, and women were no less mercenary back then than now. A man who wakes up today and realizes his wife used him for his Amex card can start over. A man in this position back in 1962 would be totally shafted. He might get rid of the alpha widow with less grief than today, but afterward he'd be a pariah. Alpha Fs were the exclusive domain of hardcore criminals and prosperous men. Guys who had it going on in terms of power got to F everyone else's wives, and that was that. And Marriage 1.0, getting cucked was still a danger, except you didn't have as many options. You also didn't really have paternity tests back then, so it'd be very hard to even know and prove that you got cucked. Boot your wife out today because she was banging the plumber, her boss at work, and you'd just be another divorce guy. Back in 1.0 days, you'd be eating a huge plate of social embarrassment. So your options as a man were to stay married and put up with the infidelity in private for appearances, sometimes bilateral. And this goes into at-fault divorce because there's a lot of people in at-fault divorce who would want to get divorced because it's a toxic situation, but they couldn't. And that's why they welcomed no-fault divorce so much back then. Okay. So your options as a man were to stay married and put up with the infidelity in private for appearances, sometimes bilateral, or kick her out and let your dirty business hit the street with the attendant social consequences. The higher status a man was with his wife, the longer the fall if he sent her packing. Today, even if we could go back to that setup, it really wouldn't be genuine. Women aren't motivated by anything besides their internal drive to reproduce. Forcing 1.0 marriage back on society would be like plugging a guy back into the Matrix after being released. I could never eat a steak dinner prepared by a woman who cooked it only because she wants me to pay for her house and clothes and kids. It would be just as much of a lie as me cooking it for her while she plots to F some X under the 2.0 system of today. Marriage, whether it's 1.0 or 2.0, is a fraud. My view, remove government from social interactions of this nature completely. Abolish child support, accepting humanitarian poverty cases. Make certified paternity tests available to all male or female. Make contraceptives easy to acquire over the counter commercially, and remove the legal and financial chains of marriage binding males to females. See, and I mean, listen, this guy had it going on 8 years ago. 8 years ago, this comment was put there. I missed this being the manosphere because this was like, they had higher level conversations back then, you know. I mean, they do now to some extent, but like for the most part, it's just like, oh, what's your body count? What's your body count? That's what we get nowadays, you know. In this way, we return to the natural order of things. Women, denied legal means of extorting resources from men, would need to accommodate male needs to realize their own. The next generation of girls would be raised to do the same thing, and so on it goes until both genders would develop a natural equilibrium of power. AFBB Alpha F's beta bucks wouldn't stop, but that's not the point. The point would be that both genders for the first time in millennia would have a balance of power. This political and social condition wouldn't happen overnight. It would take decades for the old guard of female apologists to retire and die out. These are going to be the tradcons right here, all right? The old guard. But eventually we'd progress past this farce, and people would associate or not based first on whether they actually like each other instead of from a mercenary position or predatory. We can't delete thousands of years of reproductive instincts, but we can remove the lopsided injustice of one gender's directives, usually the female one being enforced by law to the detriment of another. And I think this kind of explains the situation quite well that we're dealing with. Trevor says, the red pill movement may be going through the same fate as feminism. Started out with good intentions, got hijacked by radicals, making it easy for those who oppose it to dismiss the whole movement. Yeah, basically getting strawmanned. And, you know, I got a buddy that says feminism was hijacked by the Democrats, essentially, or the liberal progressives, and the red pill has been effectively hijacked by traditional conservatives for the most part. And it's true because you see that in the solutions, you know, get married, self-improve, become like Andrew Tate, and then you won't have a problem, even though high value guys get divorced all the time. So yeah, I mean, Trevor has the right of it, but yeah, it's 6:30, and I need to be eating dinner here real soon. I'm actually doing Ramadan today, so I've been fasting, which is why you haven't seen me drink any water. So I've been talking for about, how long have I been on? 3 hours and 36 minutes. And yeah, so at about 7:30 I'll eat, but I got to make a steak. I'm going to make a ribeye steak on the grill, and I'm going to make some plantains on the side with copious amounts of butter. And I also did get a garlic bread, which is bad, but it tastes good. So I'm going to eat that. And then I got some dragon fruit and some grapes. So that'll be a good dinner. But I think I'll call it here. I do want to stream more, man. I like streaming. I'm going to take the suggestion about doing the stream first from Trevor. I appreciate that, man. And looks like you're over there in Australia, man. That's really cool. You guys are well, I don't know if it's lucky, but I always think about all the cool wildlife that exists in Australia. And I like to watch documentaries about the Australian outback and nature shows and things like that. So thanks again, man. I appreciate that. Dan the Man, it was great to see him. Do a shout out for all you guys. Hopefully by the next stream, we'll get it scheduled, and I will try to figure out the phone calls. I know I don't really have enough viewers for people to probably call in like that, but you know, if you guys ever wanted to call in from a block number and let some steam off, this might be the place to do it. Take care of yourself, lad. See you around the interwebs. Thank you, guys. I'm going to see you guys again real soon.